All right. So, as you can tell, this is not Ask Reformed Christian Apologists tonight. We are going to spend some time, though. Oh, hold up a second. My forgot to mute the playback, which then allows me to see what some of you guys are putting in the topic there. Anyways, I decided that it was probably going to be a good idea for me to, just making statements. I don't know, spitting words right now because I just seen a picture right now where apparently something called a Remington UMC ammo in a Glock apparently causes an individual's hand to bleed and blister badly because it had the Glock blow up. So just some interesting things you see on the daily tubes. But yeah, that being said, welcome for those who are tuning in. So yes, as I said, this is not Ask Reformed Christian Apologists because we're doing a after show. And the after show was due to a debate that recently had happened on the Modern Day Debate. If y'all haven't seen that, I linked it in the description, so feel free to go save it and I'll watch or add later thing, and we'll get to that. But right now we're doing a thing where we're just chilling at this point. So if anyone wants the link to come in, let me know and we'll get you set up. I'm gonna go ahead and try to see if I can add some homies in here. Yeah, that's right. I actually used the word homies. Don't blame me. Just blame the fact that I'm just a lazy bum who has nothing better to do with his life other than just right now have a nice moment to just chit chat, talk, and invite random strangers into hangouts. So by strangers, I mean people that I know that probably may get annoyed with me at times. But who knows? You know what? I'm just gonna shut up right now. Before I say something I'm going to regret. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and send this list off of add directly people to Hangouts, and we made the link to join the Hangout group on Hangouts available now by doing the join by link. So if y'all want the link, let me know. And yes, Metzi, there was another debate. In fact, let me just go over here. Let me first figure out where you are on Discord. There we go.
What is going on, RC?
Well, it's Matt Powell and Guzman1611 all in one phone. Never thought you could do that, but hey, the power of technology never ceases to amaze us.
Right. We're just here. We had preaching night, and preaching against somebody who. No, I'm just kidding. But anyways, how you been doing, man?
Doing good. Doing this hangout because I just got out of a debate with an atheist who affirms objective morality, but he has a different standard of how he comes to that. But it was an interesting debate. Probably the more complicated one I've ever been in.
That's interesting. I think you did interesting. Didn't you have to debate Aaron Ra once?
Yep.
Hopefully that went well. I actually didn't get to see it.
Oh, you should. It's worth it. It's a class. It's a class riot.
I'll have to check it out, bro. I don't got super long. I appreciate you inviting me to the hangout and stuff. We'll have to talk again. I know everybody wants us to do another debate. I'm really not one for debates, but I don't mind it. And
right.
If you want to do it again, that's fine.
Well, you never know. You could probably send Ben the Baptist my way because I ran into one of his fans at a Bible college recently.
Oh, okay, yeah, right, yeah. Ben's a good friend of mine. I don't agree with him on everything, but he's nice.
Right.
But anyways. Just like I don't agree with you on everything, but I think.
Hey, there you go.
Right.
Right.
right, man. Well, anyways, I'm gonna get zipping here. This is my friend Corbin. You probably have seen
What's
him
up?
before.
What's up, Corbin?
I don't know who this is.
It's RCL. Right?
Oh, okay. Who's that?
Calvin.
Oh, okay.
That's how you know me, the Calvinist.
Yep. All right, man.
Wait. And he is the propitiation for our sins, and not for our sins only, but
But for the
also for the
sins
sins of the
Of the
whole
whole
world.
world. Amen. See ya. See, this is where we could still like be civil and have good conversations. Of course, I think there's problems with the theology of these guys, but doesn't bother me much to still, befriend them and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, stuff like that shows that you don't have to always agree on every single specific point to be friendly and civil with people. So, Ken McCracken, what was the debate? Is on YouTube. Yes, you can. I linked it in the description, so you can click it and add it to your add later thing, and so you can check it out there. So yeah, I don't know where. But yeah, Matt C. I don't know if you checked. I sent the thing on Discord to you to join the group on Hangout. So if you want to do that, feel free to join there. As well as make sure, just in case the link doesn't work for some people, that they can at least then click that once they get in, because I know that sometimes that'll help out a bit, especially if they're mobile phone users. All right. All right. Well, let's see one person that's seeing it. All right. And I see White Engine's going to want the link, so I'm going to send him the thing via Discord, so that way he can check it out later. Okay. We'll try this first. All right. Let's see. Oh, yeah, I forgot. Need to do the whole hide from broadcast thing in case new people show up. Oh, but we do have one individual. We have Invoking Theism, who has joined up, and I know he's definitely going to love this topic. What's up, Invoking?
Yo, what's good?
Not much, man. Which, by the way, reminder before we go on, I also want to just say I got a book today called A Handbook to Old Testament Exegesis by William P. Brown. So, along with my
that's awesome.
Along with my focus on Old Testament studies, especially in the Old Testament texts, I will definitely be having a lot of fun adding this to the collection alongside Biblical Hermeneutics by Moises Silva and Walter Kaiser. So that's always good. Now, IV, I don't know if you saw the debate that happened on Modern Day Debates channel.
Okay, I saw the tweet because he tags me in those tweets, but I didn't actually watch it.
Well, I'll tell you something, that was probably the most interesting approach or debate or discussion in general I've ever had on the problem of evil.
What was the main point brought up by your opponent?
Well, the main thing is, like, and keep in mind, he believes in objective morality.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, while arguing as an objective moralist, he believes, okay, and I see Matt's joined us, as a person that argues for objective morality, he says that the reason why then God doesn't fit this, solve the problem of evil, and in fact himself is immoral, is because we live in a world where it's not the best of all possible worlds. And not only that, that he just puts us in this world that could be better, but it's not, and he does it, and he puts us there without our consent or will. He would be moral if we were able to decide for ourselves what possible world we would put ourselves into.
Wow, wow, that's. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my head around that theological conclusion. That's
well, that's
quite
the thing.
an interesting view.
He describes it as pantheism, and says that and by the way, he believes that the objective moral thing would be he calls it the undiscovered super law.
Okay.
So yeah, that would be where he says, like, where we get our morality from, is this undiscovered super law that hasn't been discovered, but it exists.
That seems
Hello,
It's
everyone.
pretty unique.
Yep.
Yeah.
And welcome, Ave. It's been a while since I've seen you.
Yeah. Had a little bit of problems recently, but it's okay. Hope you're all doing well.
Well,
yeah.
I've been like struggling with this debate that just happened recently. So I don't know. You probably might be doing better than me. In my because it was like because
How well do you think you did?
Well, between me being mixed up as to okay, this is interesting and never before seen. Secondly, how do I even ask about this sort of stuff? So with my head getting all mixed up and jumbled around from how complicated this whole thing was probably going to be, I would like to say I did fairly well. I think my main point I proved was that he does actually affirm God. The only thing is he doesn't want to call him that and instead wants to identify it as the undiscovered super law.
And who was this that you were debating?
His name is T Jump. He is a YouTube atheist that is recently starting to get out there. Forgot how many subscribers he said he got. He reached a milestone, and he
Like they all do.
But he loves debating.
Yeah,
You say
I've
that-
seen him tagged in a couple things on Twitter for debates.
Yeah.
I looked at a couple of his tweets, and I didn't really find anything that made me, my faith wasn't shaking after I left his Twitter page. But
Was that the guy in like the suit that just spoke a little while ago?
Uh,
No, it was probably B.
wait, the guy in the suit?
Oh, suit.
Maybe it was a suit. I don't know. I have to
so,
look
how
that
did you
up.
respond to his main objection then
But
about?
it was like him and his friend and whatever. It was like some video thing.
Wait, would you see this?
Oh, gee, this might be a different video. I thought this just happened like right now.
Well, let me see if because there was a guy wearing a suit, but he was the moderator.
Yeah, like he had like blonde hair.
Oh no, not that. That. Oh wait, you're talking about the guy that was in here just earlier.
Yeah, like just a few minutes ago.
Oh no,
With
that
Guzman?
was that was Matt Powell and Guzman.
Husband. Yeah.
Yeah, those are basically like like Steve. You ever heard of Steven Anderson?
I have not.
He's the guy that basically says that he prays and hopes that Caitlyn Jenner dies and goes to hell and.
Well, whoever that blonde guy was, he was like super cute.
Jeez.
I wonder if if he watches. I'm gonna let him know that.
I was like, damn. Okay.
Well, I think he's like what, like 22 or 23 years old.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Okay.
You might want to be careful though.
He's legal.
Well, he's also one of those people that says like as part of again Steven Anderson's whole ideology that gay people need to be at least by government sanctioned order executed.
Yikes.
Oh my goodness. Are you
Yikes.
serious? Oh wow.
Yeah, he
Wait,
shares
really?
Steven. She shares Steven Anderson's whole theonomy perspective, and that the Old Testament laws like
That's pretty theonomic.
yeah. So
Wow.
yeah, he actually got into a lot of controversy about that whenever he came out on YouTube and started talking about that kind of stuff. Let's just say his friend Ben the Baptist was a lot more stronger because of the language he used.
Wow.
But now this was the debate that occurred recently. There's the other guy in the suit down on the bottom left, and on the top right was T Jump, the atheist that I debated. So,
Would you say that this atheist guy was he a Platonist? Is that appropriate?
like,
He's
I'm
talking
not,
about these universal.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm dumb when it comes to philosophical terms.
Sure.
So
So am I.
Well,
He's talking about these like universal principle God type
Right.
things, that there's nothing
that these
higher
things
than.
kind of just exist on their own.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
like
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, he just keeps going back to that. There's some sort. He identifies as a pantheist, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it. Or at least that's what he says. The whole thing is kind of like, in terms of like this unidentified, undiscovered super law that is the basis of the morality, and where we get our morality from. That it's objective.
So, that is that would actually be. I'm glad whoever brought up the if he was a Platonist, that's actually a really good insight there, because that would actually be very consistent with that view. I guess atheistic moral Platonism.
Well, I almost want to say that would make it not Platonism, right? Because the principles have to be manifested. Like you have to see like instances of them. Like it wouldn't be undiscovered. Basically, you'd see them manifest in creation, right? Isn't that the Platonic idea? At least originally, maybe not. I'm dumb too about these things. So.
Right.
I also wanted to ask. This is not an Ask RCA apologist or anything. Like, is this just like a casual kind of conversation type of
this
thing?
is basically casual Friday. So not only a little bit about the debate, it can just be like just about anything in general. Okay. So like we could talk about how we need to make a petition that Ave starts showing up at every single furry con, and not only that, but that it's free for him, and that there's like first class jet planes that he is allowed to ride in, front seat, first class, and the finest of meals at the hotel.
So I wanted to ask, so how did you respond to his main objection, that view that he held?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about it because I did not get a chance to actually see this, unfortunately.
Yeah, I have to watch
I'd love
it.
to know how it went.
Yeah, so what happened? See, Matthew. Matthew, just send your. Well, wait, hold up, because I remember you actually used to be in Hangouts a while back. Let me see if your thing is still here. No, apparently not. Just type in your email in the YouTube live chat, and I'll get to the link. But as to respond, like how did I respond to his whole thing? His main objection just seemed to be that if God exists, and that this universe is where it is, he's not moral because this world isn't the best of possible worlds, and not only that, he put us in this world without our consent. And so, and by the way, he describes that as basically we're slaves, that because we weren't asked permission or had our consent on this, and then we were just put into this world, that automatically makes us slaves to God and against our will. So, and he says that that's immoral to do. So at that point, then he, says that if he were moral, he would allow us to choose the possible world that is beneficial, that is good.
That is really, really bad.
I think that's really funny because an omnipotent God would know what every creation is going to choose regardless. Like, what the heck?
Right. The main thing is that the only problem was, and this is where it seemed that every time I trying to go to discover what was the problem, that's the main thing, is the issue was the decision of wanting to be in a certain thing. So
exactly.
So I of course state, that I think that when he calls it a supernatural, that the super law, that this is basically just God, but he calls it a different name. And so
what was your response?
So my response then was actually in various forms. First of all, my response was in regards to like what he would say, like why is evil in these regards, even in your objective standard? What would determine that this thing be evil? And of course, he would give some responses, and then we went through analogies. One of my analogies was, okay, so if you're saying he's wrong to place us in this, so we live in this universe, right? Like, yes. Do you know everything about this universe? Like, yeah. I mean, well, he said no. It's like, if you would have put yourself on a scale on how much you would know about this universe that you live in, what would be the scale or the percentage? And he said 0%. I'm like, okay, so you have 0% knowledge of everything that's in
that's
this
strong,
information.
man.
And so that kind of helped me out, because then I said, so you admit then that you don't know everything that exists in this universe, that could even be a potential good. So you don't even know if this is the best of all possible worlds.
That's a great point.
But then he responded with
that's a very good point. Yeah.
But he responded that we don't have to. We know that with our own way of interacting and able to create with our own like thought experiments and such, our own ideals and such, that we ourselves could be capable of creating a perfect world. And so if that's the case of us being fallible but still having limitations, then there's no excuse for God to therefore do what we're already trying to do.
Making him and people the God then.
Right. So he's basically saying that
he wants to fashion his own world into a way that he likes it. And so
right.
At least as equal agents, I guess.
Yeah. So then I eventually decided to go to asking him about, because he then admitted this, like, okay, so if a person if it's against our consent, that's a problem. Then say this: a person doesn't want to get shots. Like anytime needles are involved, he will physically fight against people to kind of get away. He will just try to make sure he doesn't want it. It's against his consent. He does not want it. But it's a vaccine to help out from to help someone not get the sickness that is very easy to get and is life-threatening.
Oh, is he an anti-vaxxer?
No. I just use an analogy in the way it's like, if this person doesn't get it, he is 100% with certainty going to die if he doesn't get this, but he doesn't want it.
Oh.
And so I'd say, so would you do this? And if they did that, would they therefore be committing an immoral action, even though they're trying to save his life? And he said, yes, it's because it's against his consent. It's still an immoral action, but it's a justified immoral action because they're justified in the fact that they're trying to help him out, and it actually does benefit and save a life, even though it still goes against his consent, but it's still justified. So he just admitted that there are even things in this world where we do something that is considered to him immoral, but he says it's justified. So therefore, how can we not then say the same thing about God if, let's say, for the sake of argument, he is doing immoral things? Therefore, why is it not justified?
It must have been really just an easy conversation.
To me, it was, because I think, and I don't think he understood where some of the problems with this idea. Because I admit that this was because I think this is a unique perspective he has. I never met anyone that's really, especially as an atheist, say that there is objective morality.
Yeah, he might transition out of that quickly, I would think. But I think
the final rebuttal that was the main point that I think really got to the whole case of this is the issue of letting us decide where we want to be. So I suggested, okay, here's this. Let's say, do you believe that murder and rape is wrong? And he says yes. And before I could even finish it, he's like, let me guess, you're going to say, what if someone that was the rapist that want to be in a world where rape was everywhere and allowed would happen? And I was like, oh, well, I should question if you must be the all-knowing God, because you seem to get ahead of there right there. So I was like, well, you sure know where I was going with that. So then he explained that, let's say that can happen and a person could do that, but he could put himself in a world where he wants that, and that could be a thing that occurs where, rape is a thing that's talked about, and he could, have sex with people, but he said that rape necessarily wouldn't be allowed. He couldn't actually act upon that, because then that goes against what would make it the best of world, which is going against someone's own will, which means to break their whole thing. And he didn't really specify on that until saying that he just said that, yeah, you could put himself in a world where rape is allowed and legal. And so you're saying that there's in a world where someone's will could be, against them. That kind of then contradicts what rape is. And he kept, saying that no, that rape, he can have the thoughts, and it'd be certainly an encouraged thing in allowing a society, but he couldn't actually act upon it, because then that would go against the whole thing. It would be the best of the worlds, and therefore would make God immoral. Rather, you make it up to the person or up to God. So
sorry, this has just been going through my head the whole time. First quick little note is I think this person should really start dealing. He has the hashtag philosopher in his Twitter.
Yeah, apparently he's a philosopher.
Yeah, no, this is just make believe, like worldview type stuff. This is awful. But what I was gonna say was, so the first thing I can't even get this. I can't even lift off the ground yet. So God is supposed to, with the creation of these free creatures and choosing the best possible world, is it when he creates the totality of all the free creatures he wants, then we all come together as a conglomeration and choose the world? Or is there a few elite people that choose the world? How many people are choosing the world? Who's doing it?
Well, no one ended up doing it, right? That's why he's immoral, right? Because he didn't ask people, but he should have. Is that?
But yeah, so if he should, then how should it be? Should he create a totality of people, a large set of group of people, and then get their opinion? And then like, how much knowledge do these people have off the get-go of being created, so that they know what world they want? This seems to me to be so incoherent.
Yeah. How would you even know what world you want?
A lot of those things happen to be human issues. Now, here's like the main problem. A lot of people forget what God actually is. It is an incomprehensible, all-knowing, omnipotent being. Now, sure, we might try to apply human characteristics to it, but we can't fully understand it. And yet we try to, adhere morals to some kind of, like, logic. But to truly understand God, it's quite damn near impossible for any human to really fully do so. That's really my main point. And then now we're all talking about, like, morals and what God wants. Well, how do we know exactly what God wants or what God thinks? How can we possibly comprehend his grand plan? We really can't. No, we just have to know what he tells us, explicitly, and then we have to interpret that and then express that into human laws.
Yeah.
But overall, I mean, it's really difficult to try to understand.
Right. I don't think I don't think we're ever going to be at a point where we're going to be fully. That's where I think that's the issue that what makes God unique and him, is that God is like, certain, like, all we know really about him is what has been revealed in his written law, in the scriptures, and then also what has been revealed in creation. That's how everybody knows God exists.
Exactly.
So, but they're funny, and to even further elaborate on this, especially like in regards to something like the Trinity, there was a video I saw that someone like took a little video clip thing from James White. There was a thing he was putting out, and here's what he said, quote, "The reason that Christians shouldn't use analogies for the Trinity is because God is absolutely unique." I just want everybody to focus on what James, one of my favorite theologians, says here. I'm going to put it up here to this microphone. Yeah, my boy.
The reason that Christians shouldn't use analogies for the Trinity is because God is absolutely unique. And an analogy is a means of making a connection to the created order. It's like this. But if it's not like anything, then anytime you go, it's like this, you're running into danger, right?
So,
I completely agree.
Yep.
And he's ontologically unique. It's not just like it happens to be a characteristic we're assigning to him because we're Christian or something. Like, that's not something an atheist can get away from.
Sorry, I left for I left for a little bit. What is the Trinity? How'd you guys get onto the Trinity?
Oh, we were just talking about like what James White had said about like how God is unique.
Okay, so this has nothing to do with the debate.
Not that particular thing. Just I guess in regards to what Abe had brought up, that is God is like unique, and something that we like, something that we can't fully comprehend, like in terms of like knowing how he works, and say like laying out plans for things. So therefore, like when we're trying to say that it's immoral, like basically like the whole ends and the justification of the means, which is one part I did go over during the debate.
Right. So, yeah. So wait. So why does he believe in objective morality again?
I really don't know why he believes it. I think he just like I never asked that specifically, because the debate was about, is the problem of evil sound? That was the thesis.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Whenever I hear atheists say that they believe in objective morality, I always cheer. I go, "That's great." But then I kind of, I'm just a little sad, because moral realism makes no sense naturalistically. So.
Hold up, I'm trying to. Internet user. Hey, it's Matthew. Okay, so that's Matthew. Let me move this to inbox and actually get it to him. I don't know how that even happens. Like, will you get something that says on an email, the name is internet user?
Oh wow, that's a first.
Yeah, I guess he just quickly made one and didn't make like get time to make the account properly. So let me
Could be that. I was thinking it might be some kind of a filter thing, like if he wanted to like remain anonymous, it might be a non-internet
VPN
user
thing, or...
yes, something like that.
Internet user.
Well, his YouTube thing says Matthew Ramos, and he's been on here before, just like about a year or two ago. So it's been a while since I've seen him. At least I don't know if his theology's changed, but he did, as far as I was aware, was like a Hebrew roots kind of guy. So yeah, so like the whole not Black Hebrew Israelite, but like does think we need to like kind of keep to the laws, and he tries to practice the Sabbath. But again, I don't know where he's at now, if he's still that or not. But I just sent him the link.
Was he in the Sentinel Discord? I think I interacted with him a little bit.
I'm not sure. Wouldn't have known if he had gotten a Discord. I don't even know if he thought about it, because like I had gotten a message where he's like saying that he wants to try to get back into these things. So,
well, tell him it's Shabbat right now. He shouldn't be doing this.
Oh,
sorry.
Oh.
There's another guy who started his own Discord out of Sentinel, Benai Noach, like I guess children of Noah. He thinks that Gentiles just need to be following the law of Noah to be saved, and that Christianity is a heresy. Anyway, never.
Oh boy!
Wow,
there's all kinds.
Man,
takes all types of crazy.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting.
Yeah. He's a nice guy and all, but
I've heard of
you said the Noahide
people about that.
Yeah,
who they think that
but
Christians are heretics and they're the infidels and they want to blow us up. I've heard about that group before.
Oh gosh, is it violent? I didn't know that.
Rebellion. No. They're the religion of peace. Only they want to blow themselves up.
Oh, themselves up. Okay.
Yeah.
To kill others. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Oh, but hey, Islam means peace. Don't forget that, Abe. Islam means peace.
I never said that. I never said that name.
Okay, there you go. There you go. Anyways, I do want to mention something that I just saw, and I mentioned to this person that that I was gonna mention them. Oh, we got Matthew in here. Let me just first do that, and then I want to. Because I just want to laugh and point this out, because this is.
Hey, how's everybody doing? It's been a while.
We're doing pretty good.
Christian anarchist.
RC apologist now. RC apologist now, man, and doing pretty good. All right, so let me just copy the status, because I'm gonna try to open this up on a separate window tab thing to screen share. A friend of mine named Stexel Stixel Fox, who, funny story about all that. So anyways, let me see where. Okay, there we go. Posted something on Twitter saying, "Innocent until proven straight." This is a thing of Stixels likes to post some interesting one-liners. So, innocent until proven straight. Much like JonTron here, I have several questions. And secondly, Stixel, you are innocent until proven straight, and I guarantee you this: we will prove something. We will have the detectives on board. We have detective invoking theism. He is one of our leading detectives, best known detective on the case. He's even solved multiple cases along with his partner Ave the candy corn dog. So that's why we need furries and humans working together, especially Christian humans, because there's a distinction. And then Matt C is, of course, the sheriff who likes to go all crazy on people if they don't get something right, like an order from a Burger King, because it says have it your way. And if it doesn't have it your way, well, then next thing you know, the chief is going to get the pistol and start going all around the people and trying to shoot up. Okay, yes,
reputation precedes me.
All right.
That's right there, Pilgrim.
Oh God. And James wants to come in, so yes, I'll get the link to you. But anyways, how have you been up to, Matthew? It has been a while.
Nothing much. Still been I've for a while, like you said, I can only call a little bit what you were saying before I went to look for the email, but when we first started talking, I was a Hebrew roots / sacred namer. Before I was moving around with different biblical ideologies and such. Right now, though, my positions theologically have changed. I don't really identify as that anymore. Scripturally, I don't have much of a position, but I do come every now and again to study Scripture, just, I guess, from an open perspective now.
May I ask what changed your mind about that?
About Hebrew roots?
Yeah.
I was actually kind of curious what that actually meant.
Well, it's not exactly. There's like various sects, but essentially Hebrew roots is more or less trying to view the entirety of the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, but from a more so Hebrew sort of perspective. And there's varying ideas within sects, but mine in particular was I believed in various things like Christian, or RC would remember that I used to try and talk with him back and forth about a possible Hebrew New Testament.
Yeah.
Among various other things, like he mentioned keeping what many call the Old Law or the Torah, and just various things. But I've essentially moved on from that, and I guess I could go into that as well, but it's similar to Messianic Judaism, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, are you saying that you were a devout Jew, but now you're looking into Christianity?
Not Christianity specifically, but I'm more so just looking at the Bible and other things.
Okay.
My perspective is right now is sort of similar to a deist. Yeah. But I saw the title of this live stream of the Problem of Evil Aftershow, so I kind of wanted to ask, like, who asked that question, and what are your thoughts, all of you?
Well, the question was asked by an atheist in a debate that recently occurred. That's why it was the after show. There was a debate just recently, and the link was in the description. But the whole thing of, is the problem evil sound? In other words, he's saying, like, can the issue with God being involved, can that solve the problem of evil? And this guy who was an atheist who affirms objective morality, he seems to think that it doesn't, because he thinks that God's immoral, and specifically because that we live in a world that's not just not the best possible world, but also that we were put in this without consent, that we were just kind of placed here without any of our consent or expression. So,
Okay.
and so, like, that was his main, like, argument, is that we need to not only have our consent, but we have the option to either at some point go to some world that is actually of our benefit, or is the best possible world for us. And not only in the beginning, but if we get tired of one world, then we should have the ability to go to another world as well.
Okay. So when you speak of a one world or going to a different world, is this like from a multiverse perspective, or is this like going to other planets?
Like, I don't know, because like he's like I said before, he has definitely got a very complicated like worldview or understanding of how to determine something is, because he basically said that since we weren't able to choose the world we would go to, he basically said that we were just slaves and we're living in slavery right now.
Yeah, so from that perspective, I would think that if an atheist were to say that, he would be thinking, well, you should either choose to live on Earth or go to heaven. So what would you like to do better?
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be the point.
Kill yourself? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, I'm saying, like, well, if you could choose to go to another world, if heaven is technically another world according to what atheists believe, then yeah,
that's a good point.
That's probably what he's thinking that we would choose to go to if we could.
Yeah.
But I'm just, that's just my own opinion. I don't really know.
Well, sounds like he's struggling with some stuff, and like I was saying, I think he'd probably move out of that at some point. You're not going to live in that forever.
It seems like he hasn't really studied the Bible, to that extent. But not many atheists do. They kind of just laugh it off and don't really care.
Well, that was the thing. I didn't know if, like, this. Yeah, right. Like Aaron Ra. But with him,
exactly, Aaron Ra. Oof. Oh my goodness! Don't even go there with Aaron Ra.
Like with this guy, it was like another level. Like to me, it wasn't like that. He was like I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say he has read it, but I don't think like that's where he's like going at it. In my opinion, I think like I think what he's trying to do is try to basically presuppositionalism from an atheistic perspective. Like, he's trying to work with a sort of roller coaster ride with the worldview of Christianity, and try to see if there's any holes, or basically test riding it. And this is where he sees flaws. But where I think he sees flaws, he's really just kind of either making them he's the one poking the holes, and that the holes weren't there until he started trying to make something, or that they're all in his head. That's just kind of how I see it.
So that's the sort of person. I mean, I guess he's technically a pantheist, but that's the sort of person I'd be pretty comfortable being friends with, because he's clearly searching through stuff, and he's coming up with genuinely original thoughts.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, he definitely has. Cool. He definitely has some questions, and he doesn't have the full picture. He does have definitely some strong opinions, but not necessarily a sound argument or anything. He's still looking for answers. He's looking for the answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good of you to debate him.
Huh?
Pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
Just to do that, Oh
yeah, I almost forgot. I don't know why I didn't send this to you. But But Abe, you remember that one time I debated that the Catholic fusionist?
What, me?
Yeah, like me and I told you I sent it to you one time that I debated this guy named the Catholic fusionist.
Oh yes.
Fusion.
Yes.
Yeah,
I remember that.
we did a second one. We did a second debate.
Oh, you did? Oh, damn. You might have sent it to me. I'm not sure if I saw it yet.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think I did actually, so that's why I'm going to try to work on it now. But
yeah, sure. I'd love to see it. Now, guys, I happen to be a Catholic. I know. Right? Shame. My goodness.
Hold on.
Free and a Catholic. Oh my gosh.
Hang on though. But what's interesting is that oh come on, I can't even send that to him. I was speak of the devil. Here he is himself. By the way, Abe, it is the Catholic fusionist.
Oh really? Oh my goodness! Hello. Hey, what's up?
Hey guys. Just got in here. So I hear you had a debate over the problem of evil.
Yes, I did. My good Catholic friend.
I listened to it, and well, actually, I didn't listen to the debate. I only listened. I saw the Aftershow link. I went to the video for a brief period of time, and his argument is in terms of logical problems of evil, because there are many formulations of it. I didn't particularly care for it. Like he might have formulated it. He might have defended it better after the formulation, and this is just on first blush. So the argument might be a little stronger than I'm giving it credit for, but already there are a few problems with it. First off, he confused moral epistemology with moral ontology.
Yeah.
Moral epistemology is how we know there's an objective good, and moral ontology is what does that good consist of, or what are the propositions to which it leads. So, for example, how do we know the external world exists, or how can we trust that there is an external world? Well, it seems that and we have certain intuitions about it. We have this trust or faith that our senses work, and we just build up from there because there's really nowhere else to go. However, that doesn't mean every instance of perception is going to turn out to be the case. For example, the way we see time to us is linear and it flows. Yet if you were to because of Einsteinian relativity, we know that all points of time actually have simultaneous existence. So there's something our perceptions fail to tell us. It doesn't mean that from there we just throw out our perceptions. So, this goes to the next point of him just saying, well, we know because of our intuitions, our moral intuitions, that slavery is always wrong. Well, I don't see why we need to grant that. It could be the case that in a lot of instances, slavery could be wrong, but it's not necessarily per se wrong in every conceivable instance.
And I have to say, I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah, and that was the first. The second is God has to make the best of all possible worlds. I disagree with that too, because creation, at least in terms of Christianity, is a form of grace. It is something God wills for any form of creation that God would have willed. He would have willed out of grace or love, not because of its perfection, but rather for the sake of the creatures. So if God was to create the best of all possible worlds, none of us would be in it. Why? Because look at our material histories. We come from ancestors who have themselves sinned in quite a few instances. A lot of us wouldn't be here if our ancestors didn't sin, commit some kind of evil. And yet, when God decides to will for our sake out of his grace, that's not something he does because of our perfection, but rather it's something he does because he has goodwill towards us. So that would be another point I would have challenged him on myself.
I want to debate him then sometime in the future.
Oh my. Wow. I thought you already did that.
Well, there's the Protestant, especially the 5-point Calvinist that debated. But not only we got the the Catholic fusionist here that's an Augustinian, but he was also a guy that I forget what you had gotten. Had you already gotten your master's, or are you still working on that?
I have that. It's in religious studies. It's not in theology, mind you. So in terms of like studying theology, biblical studies, things of that nature, my expertise is not in that. My expertise is mostly in studying religions as a social phenomenon. So I could tell you about how religions work in the context of society, how what goods or negatives they bring out, things of that nature. Something mostly from the social sciences rather than inside the religion saying, oh, according to the Bible, we as Christians ought to believe this, or because of or something along the lines of natural theology, where I say, oh, well, just because there exists evil doesn't entail that God could not. So that's another example which I'm not an expert in theology.
The Catholic fusionist, I believe that's your name.
Yeah, you can call me Max for short.
All right, Max. I just did have a question. Do you think it's feasible or perhaps possible for a Catholic to also potentially believe in the deterministic values of Calvinism as well?
Oh boy.
Well,
so
like at the
Augustinian.
same time as being a Catholic?
Oh, all right. No, I don't think so. At least, wait. At least not in the Edwardian sense of the term. And when I say Edwardian, I mean Jonathan Edwards. Jonathan Edwards actually has a much stronger view of determinism and free will than John Calvin himself did, because Calvin, for him, double predestination referred to issues of salvation coming into the church. He thought that, well, free will cannot get you into heaven. Human free will is so depraved. Human beings are unable to choose, unable to do it of them, to do that of themselves. And rather, what grace does is it regenerates man to the point where he can and will freely choose grace. Whereas for Jonathan Edwards, John Calvin would say that, oh, it's actually possible for me to choose what kind of breakfast I want this morning. So if I wanted steak or if I wanted eggs, Calvin would say, oh yeah, God gives you the faculties of free will to make that decision, because it has no supernatural consequence.
But he would say like it would have because there would be but it would still be determined to a degree, but you're still making the decision. Like I try to get the analogy, like with breakfast, with Pop-Tarts, it's like what you're craving, therefore like what you desire that you can't necessarily violate. You're going with what you desire.
No, I mean, like, here's the thing though. Like I've been a Catholic my entire life, but when I look at determinism, at least when it comes to the scientific aspects of it, determinism just seems to make the most logical and scientific sense, and yet I'm still a Catholic at the same time. So I'm really conflicted about it. Like, that's the problem.
Oh, all right. So just to finish up about the difference between Jonathan Edwards and John Calvin really quickly.
Yeah.
So John Calvin would say, yeah, to an extent, your free will decision, at least on the level of, choosing everyday things, or even just choosing certain goods, even though your works still are as unclean rags. So, for example, if I do something nice for someone, it's not, even that is in some sense sinful because I'm doing it for selfish reasons.
It's not meritorious in a salvific
exactly.
sense.
It's not meritorious or salvific, but you can choose to do it. God.
So you can be a Calvinist, just not a.
Exactly, you can be a Calvinist. You can believe free will to some degree, and John Calvin was an instance of this. But if you were to ask Jonathan Edwards, he'd say, no, even that is determined by the power of God. So Jonathan Edwards takes it further than John Calvin does.
Yeah.
But just to turn to your question about, science and determinism. So in terms of how science works methodologically, it always starts with the supposition that your brain and your psychology is of the byproduct of natural phenomenon, and natural phenomenon is deterministic. So it's methodological. It's not. I don't really interpret science as making any metaphysical claim behind it. It's just trying to come to explanations given its presuppositions.
Yeah, it's just natural laws. Yeah, of course, like laws of physics, thermodynamics, etc.
Yeah, although if you look at how science works, like scientists are actually not in debt to laws in the strict sense of the word. And what I mean is, when a scientist comes up with a model, their model is just how do we best explain this phenomenon given our empirical observations, and how well does that model work and map onto reality. So let's take something like the Ptolemaic system, where the sun revolves around the Earth. That actually is a system that provides results. If you were to use Ptolemy's system of the model of the solar system, actually sail from Europe to New York and get there to a very reliable degree to where you're aiming. Cartographer, yeah.
What? You mean the sun revolving around the Earth?
Yeah, it worked for 1,000 years.
Geocentric model. I don't. Okay.
No, it did work. Well, it did work because it did have some fun. Because it did actually provide people some function. However, there came a time when there were geocentric models that did the heliocentric model, where the sun is in the center, that just did a better job. And in fact, at the time of when Galileo was around, it was still very contentious. When Galileo put forward a model, it wasn't even the best model. He was pushing Copernicus's model because it actually got a lot of math wrong. There are some phenomena it couldn't really explain. And for the criticisms they made of Ptolemy, Tycho Brahe actually invented or modeled his own system, wherein the sun revolves around the Earth, but the first 4 planets, I believe, or the first still revolved around the sun, and then the sun in turn revolved around the Earth. And then of course Kepler came, and he said, well, no, actually we could fix the math and we could explain certain phenomenon like I'm trying to remember, like parallax, and that model just did a much better job of explaining the phenomenon and providing providing an explanation, and of course making predictions that work better than that. So science actually keeps on, and so scientific models keep rendering one another more obsolete, not because of any claim of metaphysics or how the world or universe is in and of itself, but rather just because it explains our observational phenomenon. In fact, even evolution, Darwinian evolution itself there were a lot of early criticisms of it, and it didn't really get off the ground until it was paired with Mendelian genetics, and that was the Neo-Darwinian synthesis, which heavily improved it. So we kind of keep seeing that in science as well. And this is kind of how I understand science and how it works. And regarding ideas of determinism, I would say that in a sense, we have to affirm in both free will and predestination. I think both can work together. And I don't really see any scientific reason why I should deny free will, while at the same time I can still affirm the benefits of science.
Right. So, like, I guess what you would say, like, you're like a compatibilist. Like, you would say, like, free will and determinism, or predestination, you would call it then?
I'd say free will and predestination are compatible. I wouldn't say free will and determinism are compatible. I just don't think predestination necessitates determinism.
Okay.
Yeah, that would just be my own perspective on that. I think I gave you a distinction between necessitation and infallibility. How God can, and how God knows His grace infallibly will draw a believer to Him, and in light of that, make sure he perseveres in the faith, as opposed to grace necessitating by nature that a Christian will stay in the faith. thus overturning his free will. I make that kind of distinction.
Mm-hmm.
I guess at that point you would not be a Calvinist anymore. You'd just be a determinist or something, or predestinationist. That's different.
I mean, I think might be a tad ignorant on this issue because I honestly thought that they were more or less the same thing, or at least like the end result would be the same thing.
So predestination just means God has your destination mapped out for you. However, how you get to your destination is one of the means is by your free will. So it's possible that your destination is mapped out, but at the same time, your free will is involved in you getting there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And that's from that perspective, whereas I think that while we have the ability to make decisions, in other words, some sense of a free will, that it's also still been determined, even though we're still making our decisions and acting as agents, making our decisions.
And I'm guessing for you that's more rooted. It's more in the depravity of man.
Well, depends on the individual, of course. Like I would say that, of course, for like if a person is totally depraved to the point that they can't choose Christ on their own and they remain in that state, then yes. But if there's total depravity, can't choose Christ of their own, but they get born again and then therefore able to choose Christ, then there would be the different destinations at that point. But they're still determined and still predestined.
Right. You can. All right. Yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from with that.
Yeah, because that would be the Calvinist model, not. So it's not a mere God's sovereignty model like an Augustinian. It's
right.
A little bit more.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, John Calvin is. I believe one reformer said. I'm trying to remember. He was a friend of mine. He said John Calvin was Augustine taking his premises to their logical conclusion. Which you know what is.
I don't disagree.
But I will say this though: there are other Catholics who would agree with that. Non-Augustinian Catholics, maybe Molinists. So
interesting.
But right. For them, that would be a reason to get rid of it. Whereas I believe my Reformed friend would say, no, that's a reason why we should adopt the Reformed position. So.
I thought that was a compliment. Oh no.
so let me ask this then. I guess since Abe had brought this up, like, so Abe being, he says that he kind of believes in like determinism while still saying or identifying he's a Catholic. Do you think then that he could consistently then? Or like just be one in general, without being necessarily anathema at that point.
Well, I guess it would depend on whether or not the determinism is methodological. Like in science, I'd say I'm a methodological determinist in for the sake of science, to get the most optimal model, I would treat human psychology as deterministic. But if it's a claim metaphysically that I am unable to do otherwise, no, I'd say not.
Okay. So then he couldn't be a Catholic if he believes like metaphysically, like sort of like the whole total depravity doctrine that definitely can't be that.
Right. So so yeah, I would say that.
Okay. Like, is there anywhere
not consistently, at least.
Okay, but is there anywhere in the Catechism or Trent that would consider him anathema for this?
Oh yeah, very much so. Trent, Trent itself says if anyone
their crosshairs.
I mean, Trent itself says if what was the particular canon? If anyone should say that mankind is that sin has so depraved mankind such that it renders his free will futile, let him be anathema. So, and that's I will definitely give you the canon. Just hold on a moment. Like, I'm heavily paraphrasing here, so.
Let me see here. You said one of the words was used as depraved. Let's see. Trying to find it.
It is a Counter-Reformation document, so they were.
Yeah, because
however they say it, they're talking about us.
Yeah, that definitely the Protestants like us are definitely going to be caught into that one.
I actually have a begrudging respect for the Reformers, well, mostly for Calvinists, for the reason that you guys are very, scholastic in your approach.
Well, thank you.
Like, oh man, I'm actually trying to remember Turretin, Francois Turretin. He actually has a pretty good argument. Let's see about how. Oh, so there's this Catholic. So he has a pretty good argument against explaining how the saints are able to hear the prayers of people on Earth. So Thomas Aquinas said the reason they're able to do that is because they're able to they're already in the beatific vision, and because they see God, they're able to know what's going on Earth, and because of that, they're able to know when people need intercession. Now, Turretin responds by saying, but you're forgetting this biblical verse which says that no man will know the day of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And if no man knows the day of judgment, then it's impossible that the saints know what's going on at every time and place on earth, even because that is strictly forbidden given the truth of that verse. And I actually thought this is a pretty decent refutation.
That's interesting.
At least it's a good refutation of that explanation. I'm not exactly unsure why God couldn't exactly reveal everything except the day of judgment to the saints.
Right.
So very selectively, but upon reading that, I was pretty impressed with the form of argumentation.
Yeah, but just think about that. What if you actually did know the exact time and day that you would die? I mean, like, what would you do? How would you cope with that? Is that something that people really should know? I don't know about that.
I'm trying to remember. Is there a place in the Bible where someone was given a prophecy of their death?
Not to my knowledge.
I don't know.
But by the way, I do want to point something out, and I already did give him the link to come in. This guy has definitely been wandering around, and his loves coming into like the Matt Slick hangouts, or calling in for Matt Slick's show, as well as just also, besides recently trying to talk with me, he's also been going after Catholic answers a lot. The Catholic traditionalist wanted to ask, even though we've gone over your name as the Catholic fusionist and other things, he wants to know, what are your thoughts on sedevacantists? Because I know you kind of have a thing on that one there, Maxi boy.
Better believe it or not, I'm not a sedevacantist because I haven't looked at the issue. Sedevacant, and in light of that, that, I don't think that I can make an informed decision whether or not their arguments still hold. And I think the safest bet is just to stay in the church, or at least to concede that the Pope's authority is still legitimate up until the point I'm shown otherwise. So I give the Catholic institution as it stands prima facie justification until I see convincing evidence otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, by the way, there is someone in the Bible who did know of the day of their death, and that was Christ. So there's at least one.
Okay, but that's like the exception, though. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
He's like the one guy.
Hey, welcome back, Invoking.
Hey, it was good.
What's good? You sound tired.
Oh no, I'm fine.
You sure?
I mean, I'm a little tired, but it's all good.
Well, don't push yourself. Don't make me come over there with my Bible and show you the meaning of a Bible thumper.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know. It's a legit threat, and it works.
Oh man, well, this is actually kind of fun, but I actually have to go now. So, yeah. Good talking to you guys.
The power of Christ compels you.
Oh my gosh.
And welcome, religious fanboy.
Compels somebody to do what?
Like every time like someone comes in.
Hey guys.
Hey man. All right. So, oh, by the way, fanboy, we're getting okay. There you go. I was about to say we're getting feedback. traditionalist, I did send you the link to your email. So if you want to come in, feel free to do so.
Is he a Sedevacantist, by the way?
Yes, he is. He follows the Peter Diamond variety.
Oh, I've heard of the Diamond Brothers.
Yep, me too.
Yeah.
Can I ask, what is a Sedevacantism?
Sedevacantism is the idea that the chair of St. Peter is vacant because the popes who hold it are themselves formal heretics. And when I say formal heretics, it's different from a material heretic. A material heretic is someone who holds to a heresy but doesn't know it's a heresy, whereas a formal heretic holds to a heresy contrary to reasonable expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the main difference.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of like the current pope.
Right, and that's the
sounds like a Protestant.
Well, they're like partially, but they would have problems with Protestants because like I've seen and looked at some of the documentaries they make, and like, oh my goodness, these guys, I'm wondering if they have a life, because that's all they really post is like 1 hour, 2 hour documentary videos that come in like within like a week at least. So they're like constantly working on that kind of stuff. But yeah, like they definitely go after Protestants. Like their biggest video has been the big justification lie, which they use as like saying, the doctrine of justification by faith alone is the biggest lie told. And so there's a whole, and there was even a debate that was done between him and Keith Thompson of Reformed Apologetics Ministries. So, but yeah, like I've seen like this guy, my experience, at least with Sedevacantists, is they're definitely like an interesting group. Like I can appreciate their like attitude in times, but a good bit of them are also kind of like their behavior is something I question. That's why I much prefer, and I think it's at the moment I see more consistency with people like Max here, who does hold that the current Pope is Pope, even though he would hold. I would assume, at least, I don't know, that you would kind of hold some disagreements with the current Pope on certain matters.
I hold so many disagreements with him. So, for example, the current Pope teaches.
Oh, me
that,
too. I hate this guy. I can't stand him.
Well, I'm impatient with the Pope, but in terms of saying I hate him, I think there is a call for. I think there is call for Christian mercy, or at least
perhaps that's an exaggeration. But I greatly disagree with his behavior.
Oh, that much is true. I also disagree. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things I disagree with him on. For example, I disagree with him in terms of saying that Christians should not evangelize to the Eastern Orthodox, or Catholics should not evangelize to the Eastern Orthodox. I'm a convert from Eastern Orthodoxy.
Mm.
So
I thought you were a convert from Anglican, though.
I went Orthodoxy, Catholic for a bit, Anglican. I returned back to the Catholic faith after seeing how liberalism has demolished the Anglican Church.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
There are Anglicans I hold in high regard. N.T. Wright is just phenomenal. I would go on a limb and say.
What about J.C. Ryle?
Oh, I don't know of Ryle that well. Although going with older picks, Thomas Cranmer is someone I actually hold a begrudging respect for, mostly because of the way he. I don't know what it is about Cranmer, but he is really. The Book of Common Prayer is a phenomenal work.
Yeah.
And I'd also say that Cranmer was really good at defending certain Catholic doctrines. In fact, RC, in our debate on the perpetual virginity of Mary, when I cited that verse from Ezekiel, I actually the way I pushed it was actually the way he pushed it himself. I was quoting him, and this was earlier on when you had more members of the Anglican Church holding to the doctrine. Although I'm trying to remember his name, Gerald L. I forget his last name. He's also an Anglican, but of the evangelical conservative variety of the Anglican Church.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't even like wearing his collar when he's out and about. He just likes wearing a regular T-shirt and jeans. And he also doesn't really care too much for formal titles like Father or Your Reverence. He's just like, yeah, you can just call me by my last name. So he's more in line with the evangelical tradition in the Anglican Church. But I did appreciate his one lecture on how to give a sermon, and it was quite funny. So I do have a begrudging. My heart goes out to the more conservative side of the Anglican Church.
Yeah,
but
they're getting it tough.
So
but they're getting it tougher than we are.
So you would disagree with like Pope Francis on we don't need to evangelize, or at least y'all don't as Catholics, because I'm Protestant. Y'all don't need to evangelize to the Eastern Orthodox because there is a distinct.
He is wrong on. Yeah, he is definitely wrong on that account. When you believe you possess the truth, you are supposed to help others to the truth. I think that's a duty everyone has. It not even in the realm of the church, but just in the realm of everyday life. And secondly, he even said something worse, which is we shouldn't evangelize to the Jews. I mean, at least the Eastern Orthodox I get, because they have apostolic succession, the sacraments, they have a lot of the common dispensations of grace. But the Jews remain, by and large, they reject Christ. They remain reprobate.
No, is that a Vatican II thing, or is that not?
He also thinks that we should apologize to Islam, which is
ludicrous. Which is
disgraceful.
Disgraceful, yes, I would agree.
Absolutely not.
Right. Absolutely. Oh, but I was just going to go on to the Vatican II question. I don't believe Vatican. So Vatican II, all it called for was religious freedom. That is to say, all religions should be able to practice what they believe in civil society. That was all that was claimed by Vatican II. Now, I know there's a good traditionalist rebut of that, but that is nowhere near claiming that all religions are equal, or that people who are outside of the Christian faith do not need to enter into the church. I think that is damning and castigating.
Yeah, I mean, especially like when you look at things like Hinduism, which is essentially modern day paganism, that believe in multiple gods. I mean, like that's not correct. Like no way.
But yeah, like.
But no, it's totally equal, right? It's totally equal to Christianity. No, it isn't.
Oh, we got a dog. We got a dog that's that just saw Ave apparently, so now it's barking at confusion. There you go. But yeah, we have the Catholic fusionist, and now we have the Catholic traditionalist in here. So if we're lucky, we're going to see a set of a contest and a Catholic war go on here, the battle of the ages.
I'll be honest, I would not. I don't. Well, it's not that I wouldn't be above discussing it. I'd be happy to, but I'm not going to debate the issue, mostly because I'd come ill prepared for it. I think that if I was to debate the issue, I think it would be much more of the case that my position was much less of the case that my position was true, and more of the fact that I am not prepared to discuss the issue in general. By the way, Pax Romana.
Oh, what's that mean?
Roman peace.
Well, especially when it comes to RC. I mean, this guy's he's got all the literature knowledge and whatnot. I mean, this guy's like a freaking genius. It's impossible to debate him.
Just keeps.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I would just say that he's formidable in debating.
Yeah, that's why me and Max, for example, like both of our debates that we've had so far, and they're going to keep coming up, by the way, have always been about just us self-moderating, because we've done this debating thing so many times that we respect each other's boundaries. We're not disrespectful in any regards or interrupting or cutting off. And we even have times to jest sometimes at each other. So that's the fun thing, is like we can make some jabs, but we all know it's in good fun. We can still be like good friends as a result. That's why I definitely consider like Max my like best Catholic friend, because I've known him for quite a while, especially I think since I started YouTube. And so we've had nothing but like good interactions with each other.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I'll definitely will say a lot more and more memorable and better than my interactions with Baldy. That's for sure.
Oh, Baldy was a bulldog, and I kind of attribute that to his British nature. I don't know what it is, but
remember, like he kept saying, like making the excuses, like me. If I come off snarky, it's because of my British accent or my voice.
Yes. All Brits have that. I really found that irritating when I was dialoguing with DPR Jones, because he would constantly throw out snark left, right, and center.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Catholic traditionalist, are you mic'd up?
Yeah, and you know what else with the with regards to the British, they're always using that word rubbish. This is so rubbish. It's totally rubbish. Well, I mean, you never hear Americans using that word. It's like, where did they get this from?
Well, I guess it's like slang, because
they always use putting the word bloody in a sentence. I don't know.
Well, I guess it's like slang that like to a particular culture, because they also use the word fag to refer to a cigarette.
Hello, Pip. You've got yourself a fag and all that rubbish.
By the way, traditionalist, I actually did want to ask you a question, mostly because you do come from the Sedevacanist side of the aisle. What do you think of the claim that Vatican II doesn't bind us because it's a pastoral council and not an ecumenical council?
Well, as the British would say, it's complete rubbish, because the Diamond Brothers point out, if you look at the language with regards, if you look at the First Vatican Council and you look at what they stated in regards to what makes a council infallible and so forth. Well, if you look at the language, if they are all true popes, after Vatican II, John 23rd onward, then you would have to accept Vatican II as being an infallible council, because it was decreed and promulgated by a pope, if it was a true pope.
Right.
But if he wasn't a true pope, then you don't have to accept it. So that's the question: was he a true pope? Because if he was, it's not just it's just pastoral. No. If it would mean that the teachings in it are infallible, you have to accept it. Benedict himself said, when he met with the SSPX, he said they have to accept it as binding on them. Why? Because it's infallible.
I see. And would you say, all right, although as another question, would you say that even the modernists of today have read far too much into Vatican II than what it actually says? Because even Vatican II, at certain points, says, you can introduce the vernacular. There is still Latin you have to keep in the Mass. Something to that effect.
Well, it's not so much the Mass. Yeah, that's terrible. Changing the Mass and all. And making all the crazy stuff that's going on now in the Novus Ordo. But it's the teachings themselves. Like with regards to Protestants, they changed the teaching with regards to Protestants. They changed the teaching with regards to Jews. Like, for example, if I was to ask you, what is the teaching in Catholicism today with regards to religious liberty for non-Catholic religions? Would it be in favor of it or against it? What would your answer be?
Traditionally, we were not in favor of religious liberty. Now we are in favor of religious liberty.
Catholic teaching cannot change. And if you go to the VaticanCatholic.com, they'll show you that it's an infallible teaching. It's a dogmatic teaching that they put forth, whereby they said that non-Catholic religions that liberty for religious liberty, governments giving religious liberty for non-Catholic religions is something that it is prohibited, that it should not be. And that was the infallible teaching of the Church, based on what Vatican I says with regards to infallible teaching, the way that it's the definition of infallible teaching. Well, Vatican II gives a complete different teaching on that, and says that that government should not prohibit religious liberty of other non-Catholic religions. And right after that, you saw what happened in Spain with regards to the government there going ahead and getting rid of the Catholic Church's dominance in Spain, and going ahead and pretty much kind of, almost like the French Revolution, where they almost like, could just, kick the Catholic Church out.
Mm-hmm. That is, by the way, in terms of, our views, how it changed with respect to the Jews, let us pray also for the faithless Jews, that Almighty God may remove the veil from their hearts, so that they too may acknowledge Jesus Christ as our Lord.
Mm-hmm.
That's in Vatican II. Can you cite? Do you know the section?
No, that is called the Good Friday Prayer for the Jews. And and Catholics, we used to pray this because we want the Jews to convert and recognize Jesus Christ as the fulfillment of their prophetic Messiah, who was foretold by the prophets, and that is willing the good for them.
We should. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I personally don't know why that prayer. Well, actually, I do know why we got rid of that prayer, but we shouldn't have. I think it definitely needed to stay.
I don't necessarily see a problem with constructed prayers. Now, here's the thing. Like a few weeks ago, I was on the stream, and somebody asked something about, what do you do if you want to ask God to forgive you of your sins? And I offered up the act of contrition. And someone else was like, "Oh, well, that's a Catholic thing, right?" And I was like, "I suppose so, yeah." But the thing is, it's a constructed prayer that one can memorize, and really, if they actually believed enough and cared, they could use it to, help those that they cared about, or at least help themselves.
Yeah, man. Actually,
I don't necessarily see a problem with having constructed prayers that we could easily memorize and teach to people. And I think that's not really a bad thing.
Yeah, well, as a Protestant, I think more Protestants could benefit from that. That's part of the every man is his own king in Protestantism.
Well, I
mean, in the Catholic Church, we have a lot of that. There's a bunch of prayers that we like a bunch of songs, hymns, and things of that nature that we learn. And but like if you really do have faith in God and you really mean it, it does help.
All right, let's get Max's word, because you kept getting interrupted.
No worries. I was going to say, even Scripture itself, there are prayers that are within there, which Jesus himself says, when you pray, you should pray like this, Our Father. And then he goes on and says the Our Father. That's Jesus is not only constructing a prayer for us to say, but he's commanding that we say it.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Like this.
Yeah, well, that's
arguable.
Ones.
But he does pray through Psalms. Like he does quote Psalm, which is Psalms are constructed prayers. So I grant. I mean, Jesus did use constructed prayers. I just don't know if the Our Father is meant to be one.
I don't know exactly if it's mentioned specifically in the Bible, but it is a thing. So.
Well, the Our Father is in the Bible.
Yeah, but he's not necessarily saying you have to pray these exact words. I feel like that's arguable. I'm just saying I'm already granting it. As a Protestant, I would grant it to you just because he quoted Psalms. And he said them to God. So that's a constructed prayer right there.
So I'm going to use the ESV because that's just what popped up on Google when but it says... do not, and when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard for many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. Pray like this. Well, and it's in verse 9 where he says, pray like this, and then he proceeds to, Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Your kingdom come, your will be done. When I interpret the phrase "pray like this" to be a sort of command. I'm not saying that all your prayers have to be the Our Father. But I do believe that he is dictating that this definitely should be in our arsenal of prayers, and he contradistinguishes it to how the Gentiles pray.
And also that, people who pretend to be Christians, just for the sake of saying, oh, well, I'm a good Catholic and such, and they say this prayer, but they don't really mean it, then it means nothing. The thing is, if you really do believe this, and you really do want to have God hear your prayer, and you use this, I think that that's a very good tool to use.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was just looking at the interlinear. I was looking at the Greek, and it kind of says, like, pray after this manner,
Yeah.
That doesn't strongly go in the... Yeah. So that sounds pretty loose to me. I think you would agree if you didn't feel like you had to say that he's commanding. But
to be fair, I didn't look at the Greek. So, thus, therefore, pray you, Father of us who in the heavens, hallowed be the name of you.
And if you think about it, the Lord's Prayer, if you, a lot of Protestants will say that, they'll speak against Catholics saying, well, you're doing works, you're trying to do works in order to earn your way into heaven, which we don't preach, we don't believe. We believe that all we're doing is the works that God already laid out for us, so we're saying yes to his grace by doing those works. But the thing is, the Lord's Prayer actually is saying, forgive those that trespass against you, and forgive us as we forgive those who trespass against us. That's a work. Now, it's not a work in and of ourselves. In other words, we can't say, well, I'm going to forgive someone, and then God's going to forgive me, expecting God to forgive them because we did a work as if we earned it. But instead, you do it out of love. You do it out of charity. And when you do it out of love and charity, you're doing it through God's grace. And by doing it in this way, you're doing God's work that he already laid for you, and you're saying yes to it. And that, don't take it the wrong way, RC apologists, but that refutes Calvinism, because you're using free will to say yes to something. If it's not free will, and God's making you do it, if God's making you do it, then there's no glory in it to God. It's sort of like, think of it like this. If I have a computer and I make a computer program to glorify me every day, saying, you're glorify traditional Catholic, you're glorified, whatever, repeat it throughout the day, 24/7. Am I glorified? I'm not, because it's just a computer program that I programmed to do that. But if through God's will, through his power, through his grace, we're given free will by which we can have free will to say yes or no to his grace, then it's on us. It's our responsibility to say yes, and say, yes, I will accept God's grace. I will, through his love, that's working through me, say yes, and I will forgive someone of their trespasses against me. And in doing so, God recognizes that, and he'll forgive you of your own sins. So the Lord's Prayer actually refutes Calvinism.
By the way,
because
whoa, that's a bold claim. I don't know about that.
Actually,
I don't know about that either.
Hold up. Let Fusionist go.
I was actually going to throw in there about how those works are not of ourselves, but of God's grace, because they've been laid out for us. Just to throw in another verse from Scripture, what have you received that has not been given to you? In other words, what work have you done which God has not already given to you by his grace?
Right.
There you go.
So I would go. Right. so I would go with that and point out as well that, first of all, I would ask what you mean by free will, because if you mean that free will is the ability to make decisions, Calvinism actually affirms that. We believe that we have the ability to make decisions. The only difference is in the models is that we believe that the decisions that we make willingly are still determined. The issue is that we still make the choices because we have that faculty and that consciousness to make decision. So if the person, for example, is in the reprobate stage, he is given the option, and based upon his nature and his own desires of his decision that he is allowed to make, he is obviously going to choose to reject God.
Yeah, freely.
By that definition, freely, just by letting him have his own decision
Following
to
his
make.
own desires.
Right.
Just to clarify, I wasn't actually refuting Catholic traditionalists.
I know. I'm just saying that does kind of help. I was just going to borrow off of that for a bit.
But what you just stated is Catholic teaching, because in Catholic teaching, we do teach that individuals that give into sin, God does give them into a reprobate mind, and so that is Catholic teaching.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's
with
also
Calvinism,
a Calvinistic one in regards to what I said.
With Calvinism, it's different, because with Calvinism, it's saying before the universe was ever created, he went ahead and determined that he was going to go ahead and remove this grace from them, whereby they cannot go ahead and say yes to his grace.
What do you mean by remove the grace?
You guys are going to have a different definition of grace than we are.
What do you mean by remove it?
By the way, actually, a couple things. First, it depends on the Calvinist, because I would actually agree with the Catholic traditionalists that it is the traditional Calvinist view, because John Calvin held to it, but not all Calvinists would go that far into double predestination. I think Charles Hodge himself only affirmed single predestination. Although, just to walk it back a step, in terms of God, in terms of grace being a substance, we do believe that grace is something which is created within the heart of the believer, and but we also believe that God himself has an inherent glory which is uncreated. So this is an uncreated grace. Those two shouldn't be conflicted with one another.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. So I would say that I have to ask what you mean by that a grace is taken away so that they would do something like that. I'm saying that when they're born, they're in that natural state. In Adam, right, exactly, as well as what we see elsewhere within Scripture. We're talking like in Isaiah chapter 64, verse 6, Romans chapter 3, verses 10 through 12, Psalms chapter 14, verse 1 to 2. So we have verses that seem to indicate, at least when I see it, and look at it and interpret it in light of the context, that it does identify that even before, in the context of Romans 1, that mankind is in a sinful nature, like Psalm 51, verse 5, being another one. So when it comes to this, they're in that natural state, and they're, again, just if given the option, he's going to let them choose. And if they choose, not God, that's due to, of course, that they have that natural state. But if God grants them repentance and gives them to be born again, then they are indeed able to make that decision, because they can then desire Christ. They have taken the heart of stone is taken away and given the heart of flesh, and that would be Calvinistic teaching, which you seem to earlier said that was Catholic. Which again, there seems to be sometimes where they can be agreements. Like me and Catholic fusionists will have agreements on certain things in theology, but there will be significant disagreements elsewhere.
Huh. Well,
well, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. Well, here's my whole perception on this thing. Is it not unreasonable to assume, whether or not you're a determinist, you're a Calvinist, whether you believe in free will or not, is it not unreasonable to believe that God already knows the past, present, and future of all living beings upon this universe?
But that's Molinism. That's not Calvinism.
It's not Calvin. No. Not necessarily.
It can be both, depending on how he wants to define it.
Yeah.
Alvin Planting is both a Molinist and a Calvinist, oddly enough.
I let Ava.
Oh, my bad.
No, you're good.
I mean, that's basically where I'm heading at here. Sure, we can have the perception of free will, and perhaps we do, but that doesn't mean that an almighty God does not already know what we're going to do anyway, and it's not already part of his plan.
I mean, I would say that knowledge of what we are going to do doesn't necessitate that we're going to do it. So just to go back on a distinction I made earlier, I know infallibly without error that I exist. The whole cogito ergo sum of Descartes. That doesn't imply I necessarily have to exist. It doesn't follow that just because I know I exist for certain that I necessarily have to be in existence. I necessarily had to exist.
All right, but let's say if you flip a coin, do you know beforehand if it's going to be heads or tails? No, you don't. God does. And the thing is, so does the laws of physics, and that's something that's deterministic. Now, does that necessarily mean that you didn't have free will before you did that? I wouldn't think so.
In response to that, then, randomness just refers to a pattern. So, for example, there's no trackable pattern onto why a coin has to flip heads or tails each time.
There is, though. There is. It's mathematics. That's the problem.
Well, no. Even according to mathematics, it only will give you a percentage or a ratio. In fact, in terms of randomness generators, like on computers, a lot of them either mimic randomness or they just take random samplings in the air or sounds in the air when they generate numbers or some such. So even then, that's not the case. Also, there's a distinction to be had between mankind's free will and any kind of deterministic process. So the way I understand free will is like heat. If you were to say, why does heat heat something? Well, that's just what heat does. It's just in the nature of it to make things hot. However, if you were to ask why does any will at some particular time choose option A over B, well, choosing between options is just something the will does. It's just in the power of the will. Does it do so randomly? No, because when it comes to random states of affairs, like let's say a coin flip, that's because of things acting upon the coin. The same with randomness programs. That's due to things in the air acting upon the program. When it comes to free will, it's not a passive potentiality where things act upon them. It's an active potentiality in that it is always deliberating and choosing between options when operative. So that would be the biggest distinction between the two, and that's why I'd say they're not comparable to one another.
Mm-hmm. By the way, before we continue on, I want to just present this in case anyone wants to look more into this topic. You reminded me of this book that's called Chance and the Sovereignty of God, a God-centered approach to probability and random events by philosopher, theologian, and New Testament scholar Vern S. Poythress, or Poythress. However you pronounce the name.
Very relevant.
Yeah, awesome. And what's also interesting that makes it relevant, what's usually will be on a retail for $25 is on sale at christianbook.com for $5.49. So definitely worth grabbing it while it's still at that price if anyone is interested in this topic.
I think he has a degree in mathematics from Harvard.
That's what I heard too. Is like like because he's written not just that but another book that's delving in with mathematics on things.
That's actually that's pretty impressive. I might actually have to check that book out. Although, by the way, my description of the nature of free will, that is all thanks and gratitude to the blessed philosopher and scholastic John Duns Scotus. So
yeah, that looks really interesting. I'm definitely gonna have to look that out.
Well, I'm already going to send the page because I don't know how much money Max has, but I do know he does like looking into books, so I'll at least send him the site to go if he wants to purchase it. It is, like I said, it's $5.49 right now. That saves you 78% of what you would normally get.
Yeah, that's a great sale, and hopefully it has a lot of good information. Religious Fanboy, how you doing? I haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah, it's been a while since because we've been talking a bit.
I'm doing good. I've actually been while I've been listening to the discussion in the Hangout, I've been writing a film appreciation paper.
Oh, good. I'm sorry that our Bible study didn't really work out as it planned with technical difficulties and whatnot. But hopefully in the future we can work on it.
Yeah, I definitely plan on figuring out a better way of recording, because that was a really fun conversation. And
yeah, thank you. Great.
And this summer, I'm planning on going through the entire book of Genesis and talking about some other discussions, like Old Testament prophecies, and talking about discussing scripture in the New Testament, talking about showing how those prophecies are fulfilled in the New Testament.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, as long as we're sharing books, it's a bit expensive, but here is a book you need to check out if you're interested in morality and moral natural theology. It's by a Harvard philosopher of theology, John E. Hare. He's the son of H.M. Hare. And he makes this really fantastic moral argument for the existence of God in it. And I check it out. And by the way, he identifies at least as a part of the Reformed tradition, although he does get, he is pretty impressive in that he goes back to Catholic scholastic philosophers to kind of parse out his particular Calvinistic viewpoint. So
interesting.
So he does hold to free will, but at the same time, he also thinks that he also accepts some form of Calvinism.
Oh, what's it called?
Oh, it's called The Moral Gap.
Yeah. Okay. And by the way, to comment on what was previously discussed about the whole issue about the Calvinist position of the will, I will be citing from the London Baptist Confession of Faith in Chapter 9 on our section known as of free will, on what we affirm in sections 3 and 4, where it says, man by his fall into a state of sin hath wholly lost all ability of will to any spiritual good accompanying salvation, so as a natural man, as is described in 1 Corinthians 2:14, being altogether averse from that good and dead in sin, is not able by his own strength to convert himself or to prepare himself thereunto. So the issue is that he still has a will to do things and other options. The issue is then concerning to accompanying salvation or to convert himself, which then section 4 says, when God converts a sinner and translates him into the state of grace, he freeth him from his natural bondage under sin, and by his grace alone enables and gives him the ability him freely to will and to do that which is spiritually good, yet so as that by reason of his remaining corruptions he doth not perfectively nor only will that which is good, but doth also will that which is evil. And verse 5 says, this will of man is made perfectly and immutably free to good alone in the state of glory only. So this is the, especially at least in the Reformed Baptist Calvinistic position, officially stated concerning the concept of free will and where we stand on that.
Is this the London Baptist Confession of Faith or the Westminster?
It's both. They copied it from
trick question.
But although I like how it prefaced it good with spiritual good. Natural goods, of course, are still in man's ability, but not spiritual goods like Don't
you think? Does that sound pretty Catholic to you? Because I feel like, Catholic with a small c, like universal.
Yeah, right. The small c.
Right. Whatever we understand Catholic to be, I don't disagree with. I don't really disagree with that.
Your Catholic privileges if you agree. I really hope you would, because that sounds like basic.
No, I would agree with that.
Oh, good. Good to hear.
Although Catholic traditionalist, would you disagree with the way they stated it? I really don't see.
It's pretty simple, but
I don't see how it's incongruent. Although,
with I've never really studied it, Calvinism all that much, but I've just had conversations with some of them, and for example, Metzlick continually says that There's no reason why God does this, whereby he withholds his grace from them. And I can understand Molinism, because at least there's a reason. He can see all the different possibilities, and he can see the future of what takes place if this person was to exist. And therefore, I could understand him withholding his grace, whereby this person does not make the correct choices. But with Calvinism, if Matt Slick's claim is correct, and if Matt Slick is representing Calvinism correctly, then it would seem to me Calvinists are worshiping a monster god, a god that is worse than Adolf Hitler.
Well, but here's the thing, though. Matt Slick isn't like. Here's the thing. Matt Slick doesn't represent Calvinists, because there's things where he definitely disagrees with several Calvinists on plenty of things, from what I have discovered. So I think the best thing to understand the representation or the definition of Calvinism, especially depending on the certain denomination, is to go into the official, like in the original sources. Like if you want me to go to understand Catholicism or Sedevacantism, you wouldn't want me to just simply go to one specific individual. You'd like me to go straight to the documents, such as the Canons of Trent, or for Max's case, the Vatican documents, Vatican I and Vatican II, as well as the Canons of Trent, among various other things. So the thing is to go to the sources. And so when we have like all the different Reformed confessions of faith that are out there, especially of, the Westminster for Presbyterians, the London Baptist Confession for the Reformed Baptists, and others that even existed kind of before that. I have a Reformation Heritage Study Bible.
You can't be Reformed and not be confessional, basically. It'd be a contradiction to... If you said you didn't agree to the confessions, you're not Reformed. So you could go straight to that if you want to knock down Reformed theology. Stands or falls there.
Absolutely fascinating.
Although I will say, I will say this though: the kind of Calvinism that you're talking about does definitely exist. The one where God where God just determines everything by fiat, and free will is considered nothing more than man's conscience not going against what God has decreed for him to will. And that is found in the theology of guys like Jonathan Edwards. Also, Paul Helm believes in that school of Calvinism as well.
Yeah, but that's just you're still just knocking down individuals. Yeah.
Oh no, my point.
They exist. Yeah.
The only thing my point was trying to make was, it's not a straw man in that no one holds to it, or it
is a straw man to call it Calvinism.
Hold on, I'm finished.
Wait. No, my point is, it's not a straw man because there are Calvinists who formulate their Calvinism based upon this reading. But on the other hand, I don't think that disproves Calvinism simpliciter, because Calvinism at least requires all 5 elements of tulip to be true. So I think if you just go after one of them and you successfully disprove it, or disprove one, then I think you've disproven the system.
But
not all Calvinists believe in all 5 points. That's the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Though I would
stick to the confessions.
As much as I would have like a problem with like the 4-point Calvinists, like the people that affirm total depravity, unconditional election, irresistible grace and perseverance of the saints, but deny limited atonement.
Yes.
Don't make sense.
Because I know some theologians that are like that. I have a book from Norman Geisler, and I actually have a couple of stuff, including the handbook of apologetics concerning the issue of like archaeology. But he's a 4-point Calvinist. But at the same time, he's pretty good. He's out there, and I like his work. The only thing I disagree with, of course, is like, some of the views that he's expressed in I forget what he called it. He was like, because he was interacting with
Calvinism.
Well, not that. Like, he wrote a book that was like interacting with James White's book. So like, because James had, what was it called, The Potter's Freedom was a response. And he wrote something then before that, though.
If I wrote a book like that, I think I'd call it the Quadricalis.
So I'm just going to rely on one of my favorite Calvinists, R.C. Sproul. He was asked He was asked once, what do you think of 4-point Calvinists? And he said, back in my day, we just called them Arminians.
Yeah.
Boy.
So this is why I think Calvinism as a system requires limited atonement. And so Jesus died on the cross for the sins of mankind. So let's presume that. Yeah. And just going with, so Jesus literally died for
universal atonement. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, universal atonement as opposed to limited atonement.
Okay.
Let's just assume that from the get-go.
Yeah.
Jesus died for people who are going to go to hell anyway. That is called, I believe, double jeopardy. Like, it seems seems to me very pointless as to why someone would die for someone who is going to go to hell anyway. Now, if you're somebody who believes at the very least that he died such that the person is always going to be available to come back, like, that's understandable. But at that point, you've kind of conceded too much from the Calvinistic system. So I think you can be I think 4-point Calvinists exist, but my problem is I don't think they could consistently hold a Calvinistic system.
Yeah, you can tell that it's at least internally consistent.
Like
RCA,
the nature of sin, like, humans, like, that's kind of why he had to do that.
Yeah,
that's the whole idea.
Yeah, but if he,
but it's in the Bible, so.
Right, hold up. Someone said my name.
Oh yeah, you saw the debate the other night on Modern Day Debate.
No, I was busy.
I was moderating, and one of them was
I saw it.
A precept debating an atheist.
Yeah, I saw a bit of that.
What'd you make of that?
Well, I didn't watch the whole debate. Like I said, I was busy with getting around the town. So, I mean, I didn't really have, again, much free time. In fact, I had to spend the rest of my time after eating 20 boneless wings from Buffalo Wild Wings to study up on eschatology because I was getting like my folks had kind of like a sort of a little small, no, it's not too serious debate on eschatology because my dad read the Hank Hanegraaff Bible Answer Man book that I gave him. And of course, I gave him that before I found out he became Eastern Orthodox. And so whenever there was an issue that came about the pre-tribulation, he said Hank wrote in the book that there's not a single verse that supports pre-tribulation rapture theory. And so he goes over that. It's like, hey, I just want your thoughts on this. So he's asking his wife about all that. And so then no, she doesn't have a response, but I get a phone call the next day. That was the Thursday. And then all of a sudden, I'm bombarded with the questions. And so I decided at that point, as I'm driving around, I decided to help get some literature that would help out. And then I spent the rest of the day trying to study into it. Like I had like 500 pages books at least on those pages on a desk, just reading them to try to get some answers on eschatology, which view then, but of course center a thing as well to point out that regardless of where you come at, it doesn't make a difference whether you're pre-tribulation rapture or a millennialist or post-millennialist or any of that sort of stuff. That it's a matter of the fact that we at least affirm that there is an end time that's coming, that there is going to be a millennium. So all these kinds of things that are essential should be affirmed, but everything else is up for discussion and is not really something that needs to cause us to be so divisive over these things.
Oh, by the way, this hangout was sponsored by Buffalo Wild Wings.
There you go.
Lucky you. I had bowling alley mozzarella sticks and a cheesesteak.
Hey, I would kill for that. That's my kind of thing. I live in the South. You'd kill for that kind of stuff. We got karaoke bars that serve good stuff like that. I mean, that's like the Southerner's dream right there. Like, especially by the time I go to, when I went to, Louisiana, before, one time I remember it was we were trying to chill out, and like, I was suggesting like, Raising Cane's or some of these other places, and then they're like, let's go to Sonic. They got that sale going on for $1.99 or 99 cents for an order of 4 cheese sticks. Let's just order some.
When I went to Sonic, I would always give 4 corn dogs and a root beer float.
There you go.
4 corn dogs.
I have actually never been. I have actually never been to a Sonic's or a Buffalo Wild Wings. It's because we don't have those franchises up here in Canada.
What about? Oh yeah, I forgot about that. You're a Canadian, but y'all do have poutine though.
We invented that. Actually, no, the French our Quebecois invented that. But yeah, no, we do.
Is it true that religion? Is it true that religion's dying up there?
Oh no! That would imply that it has a pulse. It's dead.
Oh boy, when RC was talking earlier, I just wanted to like throw in and say, hey, you know what? It seems like our world is already ending. Like it seems like we're already in the end times.
Well, Jesus already
look at what's going on right now. It's
Paul
it always feels that way.
Paul already did say that in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verses 1 to 3.
I actually have I actually do have a story up here to kind of illustrate how morally denigrated we've become.
It's so bad. It's so bad.
So
I bet it is.
I am currently teaching at a high school, and there was this kid, and my teacher made an offhand remark at one of her students, and her student said, and she said, I can't wait to see your kids because, this kid is very disruptive. She's probably thinking, oh, you try having your kid. Let's see what that gets you. Something like that.
Wait, don't tell me. Was this kid some transgender
No.
He didn't want a family and all that nonsense.
No. Here's the thing. He was a white. No, he was a white straight dude. But here
that's even worse. That's even worse right now.
No, because actually it is because at least with a transgender person, I expect stupid things. But when it comes to, this kid said something along these lines. He said, I am never having a kid, and if I do get a girl pregnant, I know an abortion doctor. Wow, so much for her body, her choice. I mean, you're not even just saying she can have an abortion. You're pressuring her into not having your kid.
There's guys behind so many of these women, quote unquote, freely choosing to have abortions. It's so terrible.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about the kid that actually knows an abortion doctor.
Yeah,
why is that a thing?
There you go.
Weird.
But when I said I'd expect this from a transsexual, what I mean to say is, when it comes from someone who's a transsexual, yeah, they already hold a lot of beliefs which are very, which I consider to be very moral. However, when it comes to however, they're at the very least confused. However, when it comes to this kid, he's not confused. He's willing evil.
Right.
There's the difference between willing evil and being confused and coming to distorted conclusions.
Yeah.
I don't think, which is a
formal apostasy or a material apostasy.
Exactly.
Wait. Did someone say apostasy?
Get out. Leave.
I just had pasta. I mean, I gotta make it joke like that. But to go with what History Net said, what was it you said that the end times already happened?
And 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verses 1 to 3.
Hey, don't be doing no Trump now. It's 2 Thessalonians.
No, because it says that day will not. Jesus' return, that day will not come until the great falling away occurs first.
Where is it?
2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verses 1 to 3.
It's 2 Thessalonians. Don't do a Donald Trump on us.
No, I said 2 Thessalonians.
2 Thessalonians is acceptable in the British English.
Okay,
yeah,
there you go.
That truth is huge.
All right, so let's see.
Huge.
So let's see here. Now I beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled neither by the Spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that a man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. Okay, so I don't see where this says there that
the great falling away. That's what's happening.
Oh, so I would actually counter that by saying this already happened in the fall of Jerusalem. I don't think one needs to posit some kind of futuristic account.
It's a dual prophecy. There's a lot of those.
Okay.
Well,
I wouldn't say that
I'd say Occam's razor. Oh, I'd just say it could be a dual prophecy, but Occam's razor doesn't necessitate it.
That was the time when Christianity and the church was growing.
Okay.
No, 2 Thessalonians was written before the fall of the temple.
Ugh, I'm just absolutely disgusted by the whole idea of this whole LGBT agenda infecting our youth.
Oh my gosh!
It
yeah, can we just get back to the LGBT
like
agenda?
These people.
Well, no, I want to go over the whole thing that was mentioned here about because like.
I'm sorry, it's so evil.
Right, but here's the thing. But here's the thing though. Like he's basically saying that the end times, like basically, like he's saying that preterism is true, that Jesus had already has returned, and that basically that the whole end times. And I don't see how you get that. From
and I'm saying this is exactly what the end times is going to look like when we have moral degeneracy. Like, look at Sodom and Gomorrah. What the heck? This is what happens.
Right. So where do you see in this verse or these 3 verses?
Yeah, it looks like the opposite.
Oh,
yeah.
He's saying, do not. He's saying there are people allegedly implying that it's already happened, and he's saying don't pay attention to them because it has not happened. Right.
Well, I think it's fair to reflect this upon our current reality.
I mean,
look at what's going on.
Well, yeah. I mean, as a millennialist, I agree.
Yeah.
Right. So I think so. Yeah, that's the question. So that's the question from Matt to History Nat.
There's so many Matts.
So History Nat, you gotta.
Oh, I thought we were discussing the debate.
Well, he asked. Well, that's.
Oh, okay.
Matt was asking you or pointing out that when he reads this pretty much reads the opposite of what you said it meant.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Like I'm saying that he's saying do not get worried by teaching that is allegedly from us. So someone's saying that Paul teaches that Jesus has already come. And he's saying don't be concerned with that because it hasn't happened because the man of lawlessness hasn't been revealed. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So. Okay. One of the questions, if you haven't answered that yet, is if Jesus was who he said he was, why did he make an error in Mark chapter 2 verses 25 to 27?
He didn't.
Well, yeah. First of all, this isn't Ask RCA, so I mean, I don't know if you want to say that, but I can certainly answer that. What is definitely not an error. And I wonder if you did actually get a chance to read the article I sent that shows why that wasn't why it's not wrong.
Yeah, but you said to ask this also.
Could I maybe?
All right.
Just I'll table this and say this is my own explanation. So Reformed Christian apologists needn't be held liable to it. But I'd say when Jesus was speaking there, he was speaking more along the lines of his judgment upon the land of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple, which took place in 70 AD, which those people were alive to see. When Jesus speaks of God coming in clouds of judgment in the Old Testament were supposed to be signs of judgment visited upon the land, such as God's judgment and condemnation of the Egyptians.
Mm-hmm. I think that would be a fair statement if you didn't also recognize that that was 30 years after Jesus had already died.
Wait, what does this have to do with him?
Right, like his question's not about the whole Thessalonians thing. He was talking about Mark chapter 2, where he's saying there's an error in it because
Abiathar was not the high priest of.
Well, yeah, but like, why would Jesus talk about something that happened 30 years afterwards? Like, that doesn't.
Well, no. It's not. He's talking about something that happened before because he's going back to the Old Testament. Because here's what the verse is: Mark chapter 2, verse 23 to 28. Let me pull it up real quick because I tried to understand where because he keeps. This is the thing I wish you keep trying to do is that you would actually clarify what the error is. Because when you say is an error, I look at it like clearly when I look at it, plain as day, there is no error. But you have to clarify.
Because the guy he was talking about was not the high priest back then.
Okay, so let's go over that. So the verse where it talks about it, let's see where the specific verse, because right here, how he went to the house of God in the days of Abiathar, the high priest. So this is where he says the error is that Abiathar here was not the high priest. The problem is that, first of all, you're trying to understand things of like how a high priest is with a 21st century monarchy type of understanding of high priest, which is not historically how it would be understood. Back then, a high priest, the term that is used is more like an oligarchy. So basically what the title is also extended to others who are fit for the role. And so this claim is supported by the writings of Josephus and some examples in the New Testament, such as Sceva in Acts chapter 19, verse 14. 7 sons of a Jewish high priest named Sceva were doing this, who was certainly, and Sceva was certainly not a high priest at the time, but is referred to as one by the historian Luke. He was, so what we're seeing here is that this individual was most likely descended from the high priest, and it was fair for him, because he descended from the high priest, to be called a high priest. All this is to say that in the first century usage, it would be fine and just as equal and wouldn't be considered wrong to call this person Abiathar a high priest, despite the fact that Amalek was sitting in the formal role. So it's not incorrect. Sense. So it's not incorrect for Jesus to call Abiathar the high priest. So the question then remains, why would he refer then to Abiathar versus Elimelech? And based on the article that I had sent you, which again, I hope that you had a chance to look at before we were to go on air with this, is that as one particular scholar, Perrin, who writes an article in From Creation to New Creation, which covers this. As we go, let me get us back to where we were. He argues that it must be read in light of the larger conflict between Jesus and his followers and the high priest and his followers, particularly with Jesus' continual rejection of the current temple priesthood. Jesus redefines who meets the purity standards. He cleanses the temple, and here's again showing all the verses, proclaims himself to be the true source of forgiveness, and refers to Israel's leadership as wicked tenants. His followers are true tenants, and he himself as the cornerstone of the new temple. So it's another scene in this ongoing conflict between Jesus and his followers and the religious establishment. The point is that just as David and his followers were allowed to eat the showbread in 1 Samuel 21, so also Jesus and his followers have the same prerogatives as the true temple people. So the verses should not be understood as an ethical debate about the Torah, but rather an announcement that Yahweh is going to transfer the priestly mangle from the official temple leadership, who, and this is for the citation from the scholar Dr. Perrin, in their resistance to the true son of David, reliable to judgment to his very own disciples.
So, in other words, he was doing it to spite the authorities at the time by saying that Abiathar was the rightful high priest.
Well, not necessarily that it was the rightful high priest, but not to spite them. The issue was that with but basically how it is like that under the ruling now certain things are happening, and just like Jesus, who is considered a high priest, he now has a thing where he's allowing people under the new covenant to follow in these certain things, like for example eating the showbread, which is something that that definitely wouldn't necessarily be allowed on a certain thing to be done. by the priest, like especially like for example, how certain things to do on the Sabbath, as is seen in Mark chapter 2. Because Jesus himself says that if because in Mark's chapter because remember, this is the part where he says the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. So this is the whole dialogue where they're getting into it about, they're picking stuff on the Sabbath day, and the Pharisees are saying, "Hey, why do you do this on the Sabbath day? Why do you do something that's not lawful?" And so he explains why, and that's because it's going on to the new covenant that they are under, and they are allowed to do this under that new covenant. They can do that because he is not just the high priest that's mentioned, but is also the Lord. He's the Lord God, and he is the Lord of the Sabbath, the Son of Man. So this is where the whole context is then given, and why then Abiathar in relation to that is basically showing like the priest that then is then coming down is like, okay, y'all have had y'all's things. Now here comes Jesus. Here comes his whole thing. Here comes the big high priest. So that itself there is the answer to that. And if you were to have read the article, I wouldn't have had to explain this.
I know, but you said to also ask that on air.
Right, but there's the thing. I also asked you, regardless, while asking this, to read it. Did you read the article at all?
I didn't have time.
Okay.
Oh,
I'm a very busy man.
Is history not the one you debated over the problem of evil, or?
No, he's not. We've had discussions though where I do think that the worldview of secular theism is quite problematic.
I feel the same about Calvinism.
Well, there you go.
Wait, secular theism?
He finds
basically God is not limited to religion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he finds that there's some essential truths about God in other religions.
Which even you agree.
On certain essentials, but my worldview that I start with is the fact that it's a Christian would be true. Like, I don't think that Islam's concept of God is true because it denies the Trinity. It can say it's the one true God, but it doesn't actually worship the one true God. It worships a false God.
But they are right. But the Muslims are correct to say that there is only one God.
Right.
No.
Well, but
the different, yeah.
Right? But he's saying that they're only right in
worship
that
God in three aspects.
In three persons.
Three persons.
Yeah.
I think
not all Christians though. They think there's some that hold to adoptionist point of view where Jesus was deified over time. Like what was the name of it?
They're called Arians. Oh, I was actually going to say they're called Arians, and we dealt with them in 325.
Yeah, the Arians are unbiblical heretics.
There's also Christadelphians.
Well, basically, Islam believes that Moses, Jesus, several they're all prophets. They're not actually. The son.
We would believe that about Moses, but as far as Jesus, they just believe that he was just a prophet.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like
basically Muslims feel
Jesus was just a prophet and nothing.
Well, they call him a Messiah in the Quran, but
they think
they don't have a concept of that.
The last
Muslims feel how we would feel if Moses were treated as a god.
Well, but that's the thing. Jesus is God, and he is. He acknowledges himself as God and allows himself to be viewed as God based off the Gospels, as well as the fact that for Muslims, another problem that you would if you were so much against Jesus mythicists, you would be so much against the majority of Islamic apologetics.
Not really. They acknowledge he existed. That's a historical fact.
But they say that Jesus was never crucified, and they say if you believe Jesus is crucified, you are the stupidest idiot to believe such an unhistorical claim.
It's a historical fact that he was crucified.
Right, but they'll say no, it's not a historical fact. That they'll even say that you're the biggest idiot because the Quran says that those who believe that he was crucified are just in big skepticism and doubt that have no knowledge.
Their prophet had an epiphany with a demon.
No, but that's stupid though, because we already have historical fact. Like we already know that Jesus was historically crucified, but that's not up for debate. That's a historical fact.
Exactly, and so that's where, again, if you truly definitely were to be caring about the whole thing here, HistoryNet, you would definitely want to look into the whole thing about. Because here, let me pull up this. This is from the Sahih International Quran, along with the Arabic, in case some of the Muslims want to.
I know what they say about Jesus. I know what they say.
Right. They say that another was made to resemble him, and indeed those who differ.
Yeah, a conspiracy.
Right, or in depth. No, not only that, they don't say the conspiracy theory. The conspiracy theory, there's really all it says in the text is, and they did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but one was made to resemble him. And indeed, those who differ. So here's the thing: saying that people like us that differ over it, or argue otherwise, they are in doubt about it, and says that we, meaning me, you, and just about everybody in this room, have no knowledge of it except the following of an assumption. So they would say that we have literally no knowledge about Jesus because we're going to say that he was crucified.
Although doesn't Shabir Ali isn't Shabir Ali the exception to that rule because he believes they did crucify Jesus? It's just that the crucifixion didn't kill him.
Right, he's the rare Sunni Muslim that follows the swoon theory, which has been debunked.
Can I jump in there for a second?
Sure.
Could you bring up that verse again if you still have it?
Yeah, let me also while doing that, because to me the best translation that's available at the moment as well is also the Mustafa Kitab Quran translation, which you can actually get for free from what I just found out. So,
cool.
Yeah. So here it is.
Although to be fair, there is a guy who is an atheist who was very popular on YouTube a while ago. I'm trying to remember his name, but it escapes me. In any case, I remember sending him that particular verse and asked him if Shabir Ali's interpretation actually held up, and he said, "Yeah, you could actually translate it both ways. One way in which he resembles somebody who was crucified, but another way where it was where the situation itself resembled crucifixion." Although I will say this. If the Muslim claim is true that there is no document better written than the Quran, I would think it would be a little clearer into the situation where you don't get two divergent but compatible interpretations of the same verse.
Well, speaking of, I can throw in another one. Okay, so you see how another is in brackets?
Yeah,
there's actually an interesting non-Muslim academic interpretation of what's going on here that I think makes a lot of sense, especially for Reformed people. If you take that out, because obviously that's not in the Quran, this is like a Sunni thing, and because they have to stick with the official Sunnah interpretation, and they have to say, someone else was crucified in his place. That another isn't there in the Quran. So if you take it out and you just think, okay, but was made to resemble him to them, that kind of phrasing goes with other instances in the Quran where the argument is that Allah is really the one behind what's going on. It's kind of like a super uber Calvinist double predestination sort of situation where they think they killed him, but it was really Allah was in charge the entire time. That's kind of what originally, I guess, this is the theory at least, to the first time this thing was pinned down.
Yeah.
That was the idea. And then later it was kind of mythologized.
Hold up. What were we going to say, Abe?
I think that the entire idea of even trying to debate Islam is completely ridiculous, because when it comes right down to it, it's a ridiculous cult.
Oh yeah,
some guy in a desert who had sex with a 6-year-old.
Oh no, he had sex. He had sex with her when she was 9.
Yeah, he waited 3 years.
Right, you get that right, you fool.
Anyway, so this pedophile decided to create some ridiculous works pretending that he knew the actual word of God when he really didn't.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, well, it's totally fine to throw gay people off of buildings and treat women as second-class citizens. So no, I don't think anything.
Well, to be fair, some Christians
is completely okay.
Well, I mean,
right, but here's the thing about
this.
Yeah, but Jesus didn't think that.
Right. You will not find. Here's the thing: you will not find anywhere in the Bible where it commands Christians today, under the new covenant, to go out and do battle against people or to execute people. But whenever you have the issue of Islam, you will find nothing but issues of concerning violence. Like there's
from their prophet.
Wait, well, to be, you know what?
Now let's look at something like.
Wait, hold up, Matt. What were you gonna say, Max?
Well, I just have a couple of things. First of all, I do agree with your assessment. There's no command for Christians nor does God give us permission to go out and have sex with 9-year-olds.
Right.
However, if you look at something like, I'm trying to remember, Numbers 31, where God says to Moses that you can take the women from among the Midianites, the ones that were slain. Yeah, I think there have been Christians who have justified that by saying, well, yeah, under normal circumstances that wouldn't be permissible, but God by His will provides an exception. I think if we're going to remain consistent, then we can't really take it out on Muslims for granting a solitary exception to one person.
No, right. Well, but here's what I'm saying is like the issue is the issue. Hold up. So like again, I wouldn't say that the Bible is putting words into God's mouth. That's a presupposition you have to make. But anyways, the issue about Islam here is that here's the difference, that again, under the new covenant, we aren't under any commands. Now, Old Testament, you probably did when you have, for example, the issue about the certain war texts that are then utilized about this kind of stuff. I'm actually currently in the middle of reading a book from John Walton on the lost world of the Israelite conquests.
That's a book that's out. I am so reading that one.
There you go. I disagree with like a little bit of the approaches that he comes at, but he does have a lot of detail to go on.
How does he reconcile the archaeological data that contradicts the conquest account?
Well, that's the thing. He seems to come at it that there seems to be archaeological data that supports the conquest, and that's what part of what he covers about in the book, is that there seems to be that case. And of course, I'm sure there's other archaeologists and scholars that would likewise agree with him on that position. But then there's the other thing as well, like just getting back to where we were at, like with Islam, as to why it's different compared to the peaceful covenant of Christianity, of Christians today. For example, like back then, of course, you have verses like there is no compulsion in religion by Surah 2, Ayah 256. That's in the Quran. It says basically that there is no compulsion in religion. To you be your religion, to me be my religion. We're at a good peace. But the issue is that one needs to understand the concept of the study of the Quran, and there's books that you can access online that show you that. The issue is that there's this thing called the doctrine of abrogation. In other words, if a verse like the Meccan and the Medinan verses, if one basically showing the period of when the verses are revealed, the latest verse is the most authoritative, especially with dealing with contradictions, because if a contradiction appears and if it's from the latest revealed surah, then that basically trumps the previous revealed surah, and therefore we should follow the later surahs versus the earliest surahs in terms of commands. And so that's why then, like the great respected Islamic scholar Ibn Kathir, he says that this verse, Surah 2, Ayah 256, that says there's no compulsion in religion, is abrogated by the verse of fighting. This is part 3, page 3.
Hold on. So would you call this guy the Muslim Bart Ehrman?
No, because even then we really I can name better people than Bart Ehrman in terms of New Testament textual criticism. Daniel B. Wallace, Michael Kruger, back then Bruce Metzger, who actually trained Bart Ehrman. I can name people that are way better than Bart Ehrman, in my opinion. So this guy would basically be something sort of similar to that. effect is that.
I mean, would he be similar to him, where he?
No, not at all.
Sort of. No, I mean in his approach, where
No,
sort of undermines what.
No. Because in order for someone to be like Bart Ehrman, he would have to be an Orientalist, that's what you have in the Islamic realm today is Orientalist scholars. They basically aren't Muslims, but have a high degree in studying the Islamic religion and Quranic studies. And Orientalism doesn't appear until later on. So this is far from a Bart Ehrman. There's no way you can say that this is a Bart Ehrman.
He's more like a biblical commentator, something like maybe an Origin of Alexandria.
Right, pretty much, because he is basically like what we consider like an early church father, if you will, in Islam, because he is like very early in terms of if you were like to put his life.
So he's not recent.
He's not recent, but he's very authoritative because in Islamic scholarship, the issue is what did the ancient scholars believe? What were their thoughts? Basically, that's why if you read Ibn Kathir and Al-Tabari, which Tabari he's more respected than Kathir. That those two basically the reason why they're respected is that they go to the Salafs, they go to the ways of the people that follow Muhammad, especially that were alive during his time, and that's why it's Ibn Kathir and in Tabari you'll also have sometimes quotes like hadith almost from people that followed him. Like sometimes they'll have like citations from what's his name? I forget who was it? There's a commentary or tafsir that is said to be attributed to him, but is actually not.
Oh, are you talking about the one where Muhammad commands the worship of Allah's daughters?
No, the one that's I'm talking about where Allah or Muhammad did dua on behalf of this guy and said, Allah grant him the greatest wisdom of interpreting the Quran. And according to the theology, Allah never turns down a prayer. So apparently he granted this prayer. Let me see. Ibn Abbas. And so sometimes they'll have citations from Ibn Abbas, which you can never deny, because Ibn Abbas not only was a companion of Muhammad, but is said to have received his tafsir knowledge, authority directly from Allah. So that's where some of these guys are definitely very well authoritative and respected. So Ibn Kathir says that Surah 2, Ayah 256, the one that says there's no compulsion in religion, it's abrogated, meaning no longer relevant because of the verse of fighting. And then we go onward to other verses like this one. Allah does not forbid you from those who do not fight you because of your religion, and not expel them from your homes from being righteous. Indeed, Allah loves those who act justly. But then Al-Jalalain, another good respected one, says this was revealed before the command to struggle against them. And to even go further on the whole thing, let's right here, Sunan Abu Dawud, and a note from Ahmed Hassan, a Muslim scholar, he says, quote, Muslims are allowed to fight with unbelievers until they utter the credo of Islam. And another one, Abu Yusuf in Kitab al-Kharaj, quoted in Andrew G. Boston's The Legacy of Jihad. It says, he says, one fights Arabs only to oblige them to embrace Islam without making them pay the poll tax. And then goes on to say, the decision in respect to non-Arabs is different because they are fought not only to convert them, but also to oblige them to pay the poll tax. And then Ibn Kathir, in his commentary on Surah 2, Ayah 256, remember the one that says that there's no compulsion in religion? He says, therefore, all people of the world should be called to Islam. If any one of them refuses to do so or refuses to pay the jizya, they should be fought till they are killed. And then another one is from basically what we would call the Billy Graham, but he's at least an academic scholar of Islam. And that is Abdullah al-Maududi. And in the fundamentals of Islam, remember, these are the fundamentals of Islam. This respected scholar and dawah man of Islam says, the ultimate objective of Islam is to abolish the lordship of man over man and bring him under the rule of Allah, since Islam means submission, by the way. This purpose is called jihad. Undertake jihad and establish Allah's rule on earth. And then says, let us come forward and fight in Allah's cause with whatever we possess.
Just
so, yeah.
I just want to point. Actually, you mind if I bring in a new topic? If as long as everyone,
Sure. I got to use the restroom real quick, so you go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna bring up the topic of the atonement and different theories about it. Is it something you guys looked into or are interested in discussing?
I'm not too familiar with it. I'm just learning as I go day by day. But
no worries.
You can go ahead and.
I'm kind of curious about it. I don't know how much longer I'll be on because it's getting late where I'm at.
Fair enough.
I remember you guys talking about stuff that like the saint, like gospel, like the apostles might know that like we aren't aware of them knowing. It was a lot earlier on in the stream, but kind of a passage that I thought would kind of be interesting if you guys were interested in stuff like that. Revelation chapter 10.
Oh, okay.
Well, I did want to mention something earlier about when it comes to Islam. Their Quran is extremely different than that of the Bible. The thing is, Islam is not just a religion, it is a blueprint for a new government. It is a blueprint for an economic system.
Well, wasn't that the Old Testament Israelite religion?
No.
Actually, it was.
Islam is something in regards to something called the Caliphate.
No, I mean the Old
to...
Testament also made in its covenant code made allusions to suzerainty contracts and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, actually, I would agree with that. So just to throw in a little more, in the Old Testament, God literally shows through the prophets that they should not only take a land and set up a government. He also commands which type of government in both. First, rule among the judges in the book of Judges, and then the rule among the kings after God capitulates. This government also is supposed to enforce following the law. In fact, there are rules about when the death penalty can be applied and to whom. So there's that as well. The whole point. In fact, one of the whole reasons why the Old Testament existed, according to Paul, was its very harshness. It was supposed to be it's supposed to contrast with the gospel of grace, for starters. So I would actually say that
no, but this is not.
Wait. Just one more thing. The only real difference I'd say between Islam and Israel, between the Caliphate and Israel as it existed as a theocracy, is that Israel was not expansionary. Israel was relegated to the land that God gave Abraham, whereas Islam is expansionary. It's supposed to grow and envelop the rest of the world and make it Islamic. That's the only difference, which I think is pertinent.
And it mirrored the suzerainty the Near Eastern suzerainty contracts where God is their conqueror and they're basically their king.
And I'm not so sure I would see it as that. For example, when God himself sets up his own, God himself is said to actually be the judge of, or the providence whereby kings fall and rise within Scripture. It says it right there. God himself is. God is analogized to a king. That much is true.
Yeah.
Right, but in terms of conqueror, when God chooses Abraham and by extension his offspring, it's because Abraham was made righteous by his act of faith, and then by the works in which God's grace enabled him to undertake that faith in the sacrifice of Isaac. I wouldn't say that is equivalent to someone just conquering a people against their will.
No, it's not.
Right. But by the way, I want to just mention something that I know A would probably be excited about. So I've been friends with these interesting groups of furries. As part of this group called, or part of a podcast called Breakfast Fur Dinner, that is led by a furry by the name of Stixel. And well, of course. Why you say it like that?
I don't know.
Boy. But anyways, one of the things that happened, of course, for those who don't know what happened. So I'm trying to be, into the whole thing and just chillax and enjoy myself. But of course, there's times I enter what's usually seen as the drama that goes on. So going to a thing that is mentioned, and Abe knows what I'm talking about here. An individual who goes by the name of Dogpatch Press has been, making themselves an interesting name. This person's definitely way out there. If you check their Twitter, you'll know what I'm talking about.
I know.
Especially when, besides, of course, the reviews and all this sort of stuff, a lot of basically big, pro-communist and definitely SJW Antifa supporting kind of stuff. But recently, apparently, and I'll explain this article when to drop a nuclear bomb, because that is what ultimately led to what is, yes, that's right, Dogpatch's downfall, is that apparently allowed someone to make a guest submission supporting, basically saying that, because I remember I sent this actually to, what was it, in a Telegram group, what happened and what exactly he stated. He's basically what the quote was is that concerning the issue of this thing called cub porn, and for those who are not familiar with it, that especially that aren't familiar with the furry fandom, that basically means furry pedophilia, essentially.
Sounds wholesome.
So when we go to the quote, to the article that was mentioned, there apparently was a quote that caught everyone's attention. Because the article was the complexities of problematic kinks, and the quote that was very very interesting was, though before we get into the nitty-gritty of why cub porn perpetrates and normalizes child sexual abuse, we need to address one very, very important aspect. What about the people who are into cub porn for the innocent reasons we discussed before the section? Namely, what about the people who simply appreciate it for its perceived cuteness, for its consensual and overall non-abusive visuals? It may surprise you to understand that for the most part, people who are into cub porn aren't always into it for its coercive and abusive dynamics. So in other words, basically saying that there are people that are in it that are innocent in their involvement in it and in their engagement in it. So in other words,
I don't care who they are, but
exactly.
Dogpatch is stupid.
Right, and so that's where the problem was, that basically as soon as he posted that, people noticed that quote, and even his known supporters started going after and say, why you put this? And because of that, he just basically blocked anybody, including his own friends, for making tweets against him and reporting them. Then it got worse.
Like a year ago.
Yeah, and same here. And so, but then he doubled down and wrote his own article where he, which is when to drop a nuclear bomb, and where he just addressed talking with people that basically were viewing this kind of stuff, and he tries to justify that, yeah, there's innocent reasons that it can happen, and so it's like, you totally lost respect for me. And so that's why, from what I had heard, Dogpatch lost within. Remember, and note, because also Dogpatch hasn't posted any tweets in 6 days. Like, we have not heard a single thing from this guy, as well as that has lost 1,000 Twitter followers within that period of time.
Well, I wouldn't know, because he blocked me on Twitter also.
Yeah, well, I had to ask somebody about it, but yeah, like basically the people that I mentioned, Stixel and all them people that I've been talking with, they were the main cause behind that, because they noticed it, and they're very much against the whole cub porn thing. And as soon as this was mentioned, they just they pressed him on it, and like they're getting blocked and supposedly being reported on Twitter for like, you know, oh, you're trying to defame my reputation. So like whatever that term is called these days, where you can supposedly legally sue somebody over that. So like defamation, yeah, that they claim that the Dogpatch is claiming defamation charges.
Well, he can do that all he wants, but he's also the same dude who just last year whipped his junk out in a public space in front of kids.
That's
what?
And he was sued for that.
Okay, I am not gonna.
Don't even ask. Don't ask. Don't ask.
I'm not gonna touch that, and by that I mean the situation, not the other thing.
Don't you? Oh my goodness, folks, it's too late.
But I actually want to touch on his argument though, when he said some people just like the cub porn for its visual, just for its visual aesthetic. It reminds me of this joke by this comedian Doug Stanhope, where he says, the one thing you gotta love about child pornography is that there are no credits at the end. People just did it for the sake of the art. The point of the joke is that people who claim they only like it for the aesthetics are still immoral, because in order to like it for the aesthetics, they have to ignore the content itself. I mean, someone could sit down and say they also enjoy regular child porn for the aesthetics, but it still makes it wrong. It doesn't alleviate anything.
Exactly.
Yeah, child porn is kind of fucking gross.
Yeah.
So none of that, please.
Right.
Even when it's anime.
Even especially when it's anime, and I say this as someone who is into anime. If I find anyone at an anime con that starts looking at that, I will come for you.
No lolly, please.
I take you didn't like height.
So, like, okay, what actually is Dogpatch really saying? Like, is this something we should be concerned about?
Just simply seems that that he's making a justification in certain instances for people who look at the stuff. The article's out. It's like, that's the thing. I guarantee that's pretty much for the rest of his thing. That's going to be the only thing that's going to be up there for a while, because he's not posted on Twitter. He's basically went into hiding. So we don't know.
Well, I heard that there is some kind of a lawsuit against this guy.
Well, that's already been that's old news. So I don't know if it's already happened or not. But yeah, I
hope
happened.
It's still happening. I hope something comes out about that, because geez, I mean, what the heck?
Yeah. By the way, I see Luna Luster Dust is in the chat, so I sent you the link. Don't worry. Nope, we ain't gonna blame you or shun you or shame you or any of that stuff. But if you want to come in, feel free to. We're gonna keep this going a bit longer, just because it's a chill time. And oh my goodness, so I can't wait. By the way, for the G3 conference to be over. And watch all the replays and all that, because I see right now, at least this was posted. Let me. Oh, come on, oh, there you are. 14 hours ago. Oh, I thought that was more recent. Anyways, 14 hours ago, James White actually was preaching a message on John 8 at the conference, and apparently they actually a lot of them, including White and Vodi Bakum, touched on social justice warriors. Apparently, quote unquote social justice was part of one of the themes of several of the events that occurred at G3. So I'm curious as to what Dr. White and Mr. Bakum have to say on those matters. But yeah, let about to be like what's his name, the pig. Oh, what was his name from Looney Tunes? The one with the
Porky Pig.
Yeah, Porky Pig. Like, that's all, folks. There you go. Okay. So let me ask you this, because this is one I still want to pound on this one. So HistoryNet, you say that you can't be a Christian because you don't believe in forgiving certain, or you can't find it in yourself to forgive certain people.
Christianity requires you love your enemy. Seeing what men are, I cannot for the life of me love my fellow man.
Why not?
Because people are terrible.
Right, but by what standard?
By the Bible standards, apparently, and
you
look at history.
Mm-hmm. But by the okay, so you say by the Bible standard. So that's it, right? We go by what the Bible says.
That which attests to human history.
Right, but you're saying that the Bible standard, right? That the Bible and what it says has what it showed to determine.
I'm saying that because you go by the Bible standards.
Okay, and by that, Romans chapter 3, verse 10, there is none righteous, no, not one. There is none that understandeth. There is none that seeks after God. They are all gone out of the way. They are together become unprofitable. There is not one that doeth good. No, not one. So by that, and if you're saying that that's the case by the Bible, and because I asked for your standard, what's your standard for making that statement? And you said the Bible. Since that is your standard, then you aren't even.
Yeah, it's your standard. Also,
I asked for your standard, though. I didn't say what was mine. I asked for yours.
History is my standard.
Okay, so history is your standard. So history can determine ethics.
Guys, I'm gonna have to go now.
Okay.
Hope you have a good night.
All right. You too, man.
Bye.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with RC on this one. History, I don't see how history can determine ethics.
Yeah.
Like you could use history empirically to say
ethics are subjective.
Well, okay, so they're terrible by the standard of your personal opinion.
What do you make of that? What do you make of that Dutch paleontologist? I think he is, who studied bonobos and chimpanzees for years and conjectured that their ethics are superior to humans. You know what I'm talking about?
Ethical by what standard? I'm sorry. I'm just being no. I don't know who you're discussing. Sorry.
Right.
Some Dutchy.
All right. So what about him? So like, what does that have to do with?
No, it's about that they're better at having moral standards than humans are, apparently.
Right, but by what standard does he come to that? As Max pointed out.
I don't really know. I forgot.
Exactly.
Do you mind if I quote a scripture?
Sure.
The scripture that came to mind is Ezekiel 36:26. Now I will give you a new heart, and a new spirit I will put within you. I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. In order for us to properly forgive somebody, it is God who must remove our heart of stone. In order for that to happen, God must be the one to first move within us. So it is impossible for us to forgive our enemies by our own strength. But it is God who must work within you. But you must be willing to allow God to work within you. Because even the Pharisees, when Stephen was talking to them, and the Sadducees in the council was talking to them, he said, "You stiff-necked people, you have resisted the Holy Spirit." It is by the work of the Spirit that we must allow him to work within us in order for us to forgive others. Otherwise, to try to forgive others on our own merit, it is nearly impossible. So we must ask God to help us in regards to that.
So as someone who does affirm that God exists, have you ever tried seeking that out of God? HistoryNet.
Oh, you're talking to me?
Yes.
Oh, all right. What were you saying?
I was asking, since you believe God exists, or that a God exists, have you ever tried to seek or pray to this particular God?
Yeah.
And the idea...
Till it got tedious, and I just figured that God already knows what I think and how I feel, and you shouldn't pray if you feel obligated to, right?
Should pray because it's a communication thing. It's that it shows the personal relationship that you would have. I think that a person who is truly born again, who is truly saved, will definitely have a strong prayer life in their midst. So that's why I will be asking, like, for you who believes in a God. And now, of course, I would say you do not believe in the Christian God, but you do claim to believe in a God. You do say you pray to him or have sought prayer. That the idea of forgiving people has never come up.
Yeah.
So it has come up.
But I just don't. Some people are just so vile.
But that's the thing. According to the Bible, unless you want to say the Bible's wrong, that we're all vile in the eyes of God. And that's why Christ came to die for sinners, because that, and while we can't do anything of our own merit, because we are vile sinners that are going to continue in sin and in the natural state, he came so that he would pay that sin fine, and then he would send the Holy Spirit to then make us born again, to regenerate us in the newness of spirit.
I got a more important question that needs answer.
That's also an important one at some time, so don't just simply dismiss that for the future.
I'm not. There's one before you get the stream over.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see.
Let me guess, you typed it in Discord?
Yeah. Doesn't John chapter 7:40 to 42 imply Jesus wasn't born in Bethlehem?
John chapter 7, verse 40 through 42.
Yeah.
Many of the people.
It says, yeah.
Okay, let me pull it up here. Many of the people, therefore, when they heard this saying, said, "Of a truth, this is the prophet." Others said, "This is the Christ." But some said, "Shall Christ come out of Galilee? Hath not the scripture said that Christ cometh out of the seed of David and out of the town of Bethlehem where David was?"
I don't see how. It just means that the people think that he's from Galilee. It just shows that they're probably not aware of his history, not that he wasn't indeed born in Bethlehem.
But you're aware of the theory that the authors of Matthew and Luke tried to place him in Bethlehem in order to make it conform to the prophecies.
I am familiar with it, but I don't buy it because, for starters, I don't believe Matthew's narrative is a nativity narrative. I don't believe that Matthew's narrative is fully a nativity narrative. For example, Herod's guards. I think it takes place 2 years after he's born, for the most part. If you go back there, Herod instructs his soldiers to kill children under the age of 2, unless those children, for example, those 2 years had passed. I don't think he would have killed offspring that old. He would have just instructed the killing of newborns.
And haven't you noticed that narrative, the entire nativity narrative, narrative mirrors that of Moses? Since the whole, since the book of Matthew was written to a Jewish audience, and it was trying to stress that Jesus was the new Moses, and all these connections getting hammered in our heads.
It's almost as if God, who is not only the inspiration behind the text of Scripture, but also his providence is the author of human history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but if that was the case, then how do we? It's not mentioned in any other gospel, just there.
Well, Moses himself says, "A prophet will arise among you like me."
Yeah, but it doesn't mention any other gospel. That nativity story is not in any other gospel.
Okay, and
Mark just implies that he was just born in.
Let me ask you something. How many accounts? How many autobiographies exist that act as eyewitnesses of the Vietnam War?
I don't know.
Okay, so by the numbers of them, if you were to read them, I'm gonna put my money here on a bet. If you were to read them, you will find that some don't even write of things that will be mentioned, where they have some authors that are going to mention some things, and then you're going to have this one author.
Don't you think this was important? A massacre of babies.
Yeah, it was important. It was important because the audience Matthew was writing to was a Jewish audience. If Luke, Mark, or John were to write it, when most of their audience would have been Greek Gentiles, most of them wouldn't have gotten it anyway.
Yeah.
This is why Matthew's gospel. So while Luke, John, and Mark do reference the Old Testament scriptures, and they do do it in more parallel fashions, when it comes right down to it, Matthew is more topographical, because Jews have already read scripture in that style before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So him going to Egypt was not worth mentioning by any other gospel writer.
Why would that have been important? Well,
Yeah.
first off, if they're writing to Greeks, Egypt can be viewed as a place of superstition and magic, and the Greeks, because Christianity was a new religion, were already very suspicious of it to begin with. It would not have been friendly.
I don't think that's a convincing argument.
Why not?
It just seems rather convenient.
Why does it seem rather convenient?
So all you're saying is I don't like your argument because it seems to answer my question.
That's not what I'm saying. I mean, I would like to believe you, but I just think it's too simple.
Well, wouldn't the same thing then be said of God then? Like, so basically the evidence is out there of God, yet so people that I just can't believe something like this, or they
Huxley himself actually said one of the reasons he believed in Darwinian evolution was the fact that the theory was so simple. Like the very fact that Darwin made some basic insights and elaborated a whole theory out of it was simple, and yet it evolved. And yet the scientific theory evolved into something which a lot of the community seemed to accept with a few revisions here and there.
Yeah.
Simplicity doesn't entail something's wrong. So, for example, if I went and saw this beautiful birdhouse, and I said, "Oh, wow, this is great. Who built it?" And someone said, "Oh, my dad, who's a carpenter." Well, I don't really need any more information. That's very simple too.
Mm-hmm.
I could come up with a very.
I just wanted to say real quick, hello, Luna, who has just joined us.
Hey.
Hey. I love your avatar.
Oh, thank you.
Sailor Moon is a very underappreciated anime.
Thank you.
Really, it was ragingly popular in the 90s.
I wanna.
The creator of Sailor Moon and Yu Yu Hakusho are married.
What? Oh. No way!
Yeah, I found that out today.
Wow, that's actually pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Power couple.
Isn't he also a Christian? I forgot.
I don't remember.
I mean, he does believe in heaven and hell, although maybe that it's also found in traditional Japanese religion. Never mind.
It's found in just about every religion.
Right. In any case, the complexity or simplicity of an answer doesn't determine whether it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah.
So yeah, like I mean, based on like what.
I think it would be something worth mentioning.
Right, but that's the thing that can be said of anything in any history thing, and if you are like a history guy, as your name indicates, what you've told me.
And Luke also mentioned his when he was 12 years old, going to the temple in Jerusalem. Surprised Matthew didn't mention that either.
Okay.
Well, are you familiar with the distinction between logos, pathos, and ethos?
I vaguely remember.
Okay, so logos is just basically.
I know the logos. It's the personification of logic and reason itself that personified as Jesus.
But outside of the Christian context, it just means logic or reasoning.
Yeah.
So there's that providing information, but pathos and ethos are also about how people receive that information, what makes them more likely to accept your argument and your conclusion. The Gospels weren't just written to inform the audience, they're written to convince their audience. And if your audience is going to have problems based upon a trip down to Egypt, then yeah, why bother bringing that into it? It's a stumbling block.
Okay, the point I was getting at is that the idea was that Jesus was born in Nazareth, or so the author of John implies, and people were wondering if he was the Messiah, why wasn't he born in Bethlehem?
Yeah, well, just escape. They probably didn't know that he. They probably just didn't know his history. That just speaks to the ignorance of the audience. It's very possible that someone could be ignorant of it. I spent for example, if I was born in the United States, let's say I was born in Michigan, but as soon as I'm a month old, I went over to Halifax, and I lived there, and I just went over. I lived there, and people, and of course, I started speaking about my um, American citizenship, and somebody asked me, "Wait, how do you have American citizenship? I thought you were born in Halifax." It's quite possible that person just wasn't aware I was born in another country, especially if they didn't know me quite well.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, I mean, with history, as I was trying to say, I mean, you'll find things that what you're criticizing the New Testament of doing, with supposed errors and such, that you'll actually find what you're accusing as being like something weird.
I mean, there are so many.
You'll find that you will find those same things in every form of historical work.
I know.
When we do the history,
I know, which
today.
is why we're on guard with the same way.
But no, we're not really, because that's the thing. We can appreciate and say that these things actually help prove the historicity of certain events. And that's why, for example, like with certain things, like, for example, supposed contradictions of things, they actually help us narrow down more historical accuracy of an event if we, of course, have all four gospels. Because supposed contradictions, like when I say contradiction, that just means a little disagreement on, or if different.
No, I mean there's contradiction, like in Mark, Jesus forbids divorce totally, but in Matthew he adds that except for if you're getting cuckolded, basically.
Where does he say that in Matthew?
Oh, I would also act.
I forgot the exact verse, but Mark.
Oh,
and Mark, we
hold up, Max. You want to say something?
Oh yeah, just to say, yeah, St. John Chrysostom actually pointed out something fairly interesting. If all the Gospels gave the same seamless information, then people would have just accused the Gospel writers of conspiring with one another. So this would have just been a case of damned if you do, damned if you don't.
I know, but these are supposedly divine inspired accounts.
Okay.
Yeah, and God, in His inspiration, decided not to give four Gospels with the same seamless information, so people wouldn't think that the writers and authors were conspiring. Like,
but
that's totally possible. It's a stylistic choice.
That also gives doubts as to what Jesus actually said and did.
It would have given more. Yeah, but the contrary would have given more doubt.
Exactly.
Because in Mark, Jesus says divorce is absolutely forbidden. But
here's the thing: if there was one unified, or if they all said the same exact thing, then, as Max pointed out, and as what detectives will tell you today, that gives more suspicion and more doubt to distrust them. It's more reliable.
Let's also not forget St. John Chrysostom, but.
Yeah. So, yeah, like if you have contradictions in certain stories, that gives them more reliability because they're being honest and truthful in what they're bringing about, as well as their specific purpose, which you keep saying, like, different things that they're mentioning, they need to all say the same thing. There's a purpose and a reason why they don't mention certain things. And if you would just pick up an introduction of the New Testament or a commentary on a specific gospel, they tell you in their and the introduction, especially when you're dealing with occasion and purpose being part of the thing, like I have in this one here, they'll tell you why Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John wrote these specific gospels and for what purpose and what reason and occasion that was, based on what we examine in the text itself, as well as the church history from people that were familiar with these authors and the intent.
Oh, by the way, just to address the discrepancy between Luke 16:18 and Mark 10 Mark 10 verses 10 to 12. So in Luke we read, everyone who divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery, and he who marries a woman divorced from her husband commits adultery. In Mark we read, and in the house the disciples asked him again about this matter, and he said, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. If she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery. And I believe he says, with the exception of, what was it? let's see, in the house. Oh, are you referring to the fact that the verse also stipulates in the exception of adultery?
Mark, Jesus doesn't mention anything about adultery. He just says that marriage is forbidden, or he forbids marriage, or he frowns upon it.
Well, he never.
In Matthew and Luke, there's an added thing to it, like except if your wife is cheating on you, then divorce her.
Are you familiar with the Greek word porneia?
No.
So porneia, where we get the word pornography in English, isn't necessarily. So when people interpret the Greek word porneia, it doesn't mean specifically adultery. It actually just refers to sexual immorality in general, or some translations also put it as fornication. The way I understand it, Jesus is actually speaking of instances of sexual immorality, which invalidate the marriage to begin with. So, for example, in the Catholic faith, if we find out that a brother and a sister were married, then we don't divorce the brother and sister. We annul the marriage. We declare that the marriage wasn't valid to begin with. It's the difference between canceling a contract and saying the contract wasn't valid to begin with. We believe that in such a case, Jesus is alluding to sexual immoralities which invalidate the marriage from the get-go.
Yeah. And so, and to add another thing, just to add a bit of a commentary from Dr. Gill on saving for the cause of fornication, which must not be taken strictly for what is called fornication, but is including adultery, incest, or any unlawful copulation, and as opposed to the sense and practices of the Pharisees, who were on the side of Hillel, who admitted of divorce upon the most foolish and frivolous pretenses, whatever, when Shammai and his followers insisted on it, that a man ought only to put away his wife for uncleanliness, in which they agreed with Christ.
Oh. Yeah, I wouldn't agree exactly with Gil's take on this one, because the House of Shammai was still a very respected opinion, but for the Pharisees, this was considered to be controversial. At the time, the House of Shammai was actually the position that most of the Pharisees held to, which is why Jesus often condemned them for holding too much to the letter of the law rather than the spirit.
Yeah,
I'd say Jesus is actually being stricter than Shammai here, but I think what he's alluding to isn't adultery, but just forms of sexual immorality which invalidate the marriage. This would be my own position. As you know, I'm a lot stricter. But but let's say for the sake of argument that we agree that porneia strictly meant adultery, then all I see that's being done is we have a couple of authors that are emphasizing a point that the other authors omitted. Thus, you harmonize the two gospels based on that. I think someone could just take that position.
Right, because Mark is not really trying to put too much detail in his thing. Notice that his is the shortest of the gospels, and from way he seems, he's just trying to quickly get into certain stories and get especially to the nitty gritty of things, so as to then the way it ends, at least based on what I understand. Because currently I'm in the position that verse 8 is the last verse, and that verses 9 through 20 aren't canon. But recently there's been a book that's been published where it is from a scholar making new arguments from scholarship for the authenticity of the last verses of 9 through 20. So I'm going to order that and see what his case is. But let's just go with verse 8 in that regard. What we're getting then is that he's trying to put us in the footsteps of the apostles and say, okay, if you were to see all this, and even at this end of the story that's what just happened and that's what you're left with, how would you respond for your gospel or the gospel that is presented to you? How would you respond to that scene if you were in the footsteps of those apostles and you've seen this happen? So it's pretty much trying to give that, and he's just not putting much detail in some of the other stuff that compared to Matthew and others would focus on for the sake of theology and addressing certain issues, like Matthew addressing for a Jewish audience in the Hebrew dialect, among various other things. So you have this and that's what we need to keep in mind, is that each gospel is written by a specific author with a specific literary style and intent, and why they're making this gospel.
Also, the idea of scriptural inerrancy is just the doctrine that the original manuscripts, when they were penned, are inerrant. It's quite possible that our scriptures, or at least the copies we have, might have some omissions here and there.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if you're just because I'm committed to scriptural inerrancy doesn't mean I'm committed to the idea that every text and manuscript that we have today is identical to the Gospels as they are originally penned. One does not imply the other. I just believe that the manuscripts we have today are reliable to give us the essential doctrines of the faith.
All right, you're Catholic. What do you make of the theory that's even supported by a devout Catholic scholar, who's the leading scholar on this theory, that Yahweh was originally a Canaanite storm god or some shit?
Who is this Catholic?
Mark Smith.
So he believes that Yahweh is the Canaanite storm god?
That the Israelites were always polytheistic, and over time they came to see Yahweh as the one God rather than just one of many.
Well, if he's coming from the Old Testament through the perspective of studying it critically as an uninspired text and giving it a naturalistic background and origin, then yeah, he's just working within the context of critical scholarship. But if he's saying that that's theologically something that the Bible informs us of, then I think he's wrong. And even then, I don't particularly buy it for a couple of reasons. For example, the term Yahweh, the term Yahweh was used as a replacement or a supplement of God's real name, because you were not supposed to say the name of God, because that would take the Lord's name in vain. Instead, Yahweh is just an approximation of something like Adonai, which just means Lord. It's a title. It's titular. It's not a proper noun.
Doesn't Yahweh mean I am?
I mean, it's not a name. It's not a name. It's like if I addressed Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II as the Queen of England, or the Queen. All hail the Queen. She is the Queen. It's not like I'm saying that she is identical to the previous monarch who would also have been called the Queen, or that anyone who used the term to identify someone else is using it in the same way I am when I identify her. I do believe that the title would have been used to reference other deities, but just because I believe that doesn't mean I believe that they just uprooted that deity wholesale and stripped away its more polytheistic elements. That much I don't really buy. I think whenever we address pluralities within the Bible, it's just God in front of the council of his council of angels. The term El in Scripture means the powers. In fact, Moses
doesn't El mean deity?
Deity, yes, or the power. In fact,
the head of the Canaanite pantheon was named El, the bull god.
Yeah, there's Elohim is also a plural form. It translates to other things, and of course, you could call all deities the deity. It's also titular as well. We don't actually know the name of God anymore because none of the scriptures we have can attest to it. But in any case, the term Elohim was also applied very liberally too. In fact, God says to Moses in the Old Testament, "I will make you a god unto Pharaoh." Does this mean that Moses is a deity now? No, it just means that.
Well, there's a second temple of Jews that deified Enoch and Moses and them on par with the archangels.
Yeah, but I mean, even Christians are deified as well in Scripture. That's what in the Orthodox Church, it's called theosis, and in the West we just call it sanctification. The idea is that over time we become less and less sinful and more in the image God requests of us. Even the Catholic doctrine of purgatory is the idea that if we go into the grave with venial sins, we're still being regenerate and made for heaven. It's kind of analogized to putting a sword into a fire. The sword takes on similar properties to the fire, being hot, but it doesn't mean that the sword is there for fire. It's just, yeah, at a certain point, I believe that when Scripture refers to someone as God, it's just referring to the fact that he is so close to God that he's kind of an extension of the divine. It's different, though, with Jesus, who takes on the divine name himself. So for example, the Logos,
only in the
Logos being John, the Logos being Christ, who is God and is with God. So it's not just a matter of being an extension of God; it's also a matter of being identical to God.
So, I want us to get back on the, because I want to make this be the last thing that we go over, is like, again, the issue of why you, while same, like, is there anything wrong with Christianity?
No.
So then, if it's true, then you're like
if
willingly.
If I were to be a Christian, I would. If I were to call myself that, I'd be a hypocrite because I don't love my enemy.
Okay, but the issue
and
is,
I see truths in various faiths and beliefs.
Right, but some of the truths that you claim that are true are actually false, based on, as we pointed out in the last time we discussed this, was like you said that they believe in the same God. There's different version.
They do.
They
Different
don't though.
versions of the same God.
Believe
Even you said that.
a different version that is false, meaning he's entirely false and he's not the same God.
Right. So there's a Catholic bishop, Archbishop Fulton Sheen, who said that when it comes to other religions, the way you see the truth in them is by taking Christ himself, who is truth. And in terms of, and the other religions are true only insofar as they approximate Christ. So I think that while Islam is false, it's in recognizing Jesus as a prophet, insofar as doing that, they are at least truer than Judaism. However, when the Jews recognize that there is a Messiah who is coming to, who is going to become the greatest, I think that, or who is the greatest and most beloved to the God, I think that they are truer than the Muslims, who believe that the Messiah is going to be second to the Prophet Muhammad. So this is kind of how you're supposed to see it. But to loving your enemies, what do you find objectionable about loving one's enemies?
I mean, I don't really find it objectionable. I just don't love my enemy.
What do you mean by love?
Like, love them as you would people who you deem...
No, I'm asking for a definition. How do you define love?
Like, great affection you feel towards them, respect, all that.
Oh, yeah, that's not required of you to love your enemies. So in terms of love, the sense of the word that I believe Christ is commanding, it's called agape. Agape is love from charity, meaning to will the good for the other for its own sake. You don't have to like your enemy. You don't have to show affection. You don't have to be excited for them. You don't have to treat them like you would a romantic partner or a good friend. All that's required of you to do is will for them the good, which is God. You're supposed to pray for their conversion. You're supposed to make sure, you're supposed to will that they are converted, hope for it, things of that nature, because God has done far more for you than you have for your enemy. And because God willed your salvation, not because of anything you did, but for its own sake, you're supposed to extend that to others. You are an enemy of God until such a time where He willed the good for you. So it's only fair that you are to do likewise to those whom you consider your enemies.
Yeah.
So, like the fruit of the spirit is love being another thing. So being born again there, and I'm looking right now at the Mounce's complete expository dictionary of Old and New Testament words. So Max, do you remember what verse it was that uses the whole love your enemy as well?
Not off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
Let me take a. By the way, what's that music? I'm worried about getting a copyright strike because of that.
What music?
There's music playing in the background of your thing.
Oh, they won't be able to identify it.
Trust me, there's been times I've had it happen before.
It's a game you probably played, but no.
Okay, but I'm just still talking about like just people that are watching, or the fact that YouTube's audio thing for copyright like doesn't auto pick it up. Like it's like it just manages to pick something up automatically at the minute something gets uploaded.
It's from a popular game, but the music itself is not that memorable enough to have
that. Doesn't matter if it's not memorable enough. The issue is if a company owns it, they put a copyright licensing on it.
By the way, the verse you're looking for is Matt 544.
Okay, 544 agape. Because I'm looking, because they'll define it within the context as well and point at the to verses to try to get to it. So let me see if I can find that here.
Yeah,
I gotta get going.
Yeah, it does say agape.
Yeah, so
I gotta get going.
Logo. Oh, all right.
Yeah. It's a shame that that's the one thing that's keeping him from making the profession.
Well, yeah. Oh, by the way, I have to say it's quite a shame that me and you are separated across denominations like this, because we actually don't make too half bad a team.
There you go. But I think that's the beauty of our friendship, is that we managed to be that way. Like we can be like that big of a split between our beliefs, but we're still able to have fun and interact. Just like we have a diverse group of people here. We have me, an anime weeaboo. We have you, the Catholic pirate. Yes, I say that because you have that eye patch on you. We have our wonderful Sailor Moon furry, purple kitten. I say kitten because I just mean that within the general sense. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. I'm just trying to sound cool. And then we have James over there, who last I checked is in the National Guard, so he can kill us essentially.
He's in the National. He's in the National Guard. Yeah, you could tell me that when he's in an actual segment of the military. I'm kidding, James.
Hey,
I'm just kidding.
Hey, I'll almost hit you with my rifle from 300 meters.
So we're like our own unique A team. Like, and Luna is our Mr. T.
Well, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another.
There you go.
Proverbs 27:17. I think that's a good verse to capture this frenemyship.
Frenemyship.
It's combination of friendship and enemy. I say enemy in the sense that we also have an adversarial side to this friendship, because we constantly debate one another.
I thought you said frenemy at first.
Oh, frenemy. Yeah, a frenemyship.
Like about to say, like you're talking about some kind of like we're friends who like watch anime and we're being shipped together. Like that would be like the. Anyways, before I make that weird,
do not give people ideas.
Okay, RC.
Hey, people already have us.
Hey, you mentioned it. You're the one who brought it up out of your own mouth.
Hey,
If someone does this, I do not want to be alerted to it.
Oh, I already guarantee you someone's going to try to do it because what was it? There's this one guy, John Kubiak was this guy's name. I don't even know like how I came across it. I just typed in my name to see if like anyone made any videos of me. And for some reason, whenever it was the hell debate that I did with some guy on the non sequitur, someone made a video that said, hold up, let me get my dark conspiracy voice out. Secretly homosexual anti-gay apologist exposed.
Secret homo. Hey, that's not. Hey, that's not true. You're
homosexual anti-gay apologist exposed.
Yeah,
that is so not true. It's not a secret. I'm kidding.
What was funny was the comments that Christian anarchist, a layman Christian apologist who changed his username to RC apologist, is a homosexual who pretends to be a Christian apologist, outwardly bashing gays while hitting on other men. Shameful. Number one, I don't recall ever openly bashing any gay people. Number two, where is this idea of me being gay? Sure, during this I did make a smart aleck comment towards Kyle of Non Sequitur, say after he said, "But I've never heard something like that. I'm blown away. I'm speechless." And he's like, and I just replied, "Well, don't worry. I'll have plenty more ways to sweep you off your feet and leave you breathless." And so then, what was it? Steve looks over, was like, "Well, that kind of sexual, right? Sounded sexual right there." And I'm like, "Hey, you assumed it, you perverts." But yeah, someone took this and legit was like trying to push this. But I think this was a troll because if it's the same one from Twitter, that guy would make Twitter accounts just like what was it? I checked my notification and had 15 notifications of this guy just posting gay porn on. So like, of course, I reported the guy and his account would get terminated because you don't post things like that, especially in a spamming fashion on Twitter. So yeah, I think the guy was just upset that I wasn't appreciating his porn. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry, folks. I'm asexual. Like I just don't. I don't.
You are?
Yeah, like to me, I don't find the things attractive. The only thing I love is myself. So I guess you could say I'm selfish sexual at that point. But yeah, like I don't see where there's any like to me it just doesn't do it much as I thought, and that's probably why I didn't do well with trying to flirt or go on much dates back then, because to me it was like being focused on that. Now, granted, I'll probably date somebody, but that's as far as and marriage. That's as far as it goes. To me, I don't think like sex for me is going to really need to be involved with that. To me, I think the best thing in life would be just holding hands and kisses and just spending time and focusing on what people share with each other. I think that's the main thing that people need today, especially in a culture that's thriving off of a sexual fueled energy in the culture today. I think it's a lost thing, and I'm surprised I actually even met like when I joined the Christian Furs chat. That's right, I'm a furry. Deal with it. Apparently they're like all over the place. Like they call them aces. So I'm an ace.
Hey.
But not to be confused with the Motorhead song. I'm not an ace of spades. So
you're an ace? So that means RC apologist Ace Asparagus exposed.
My gosh.
You're a vegetable.
Hang it.
If you ever decide, if you ever did decide to swim over to Rome, you would actually being an asexual would help you quite a bit in terms of doing ministry. Just in the sense of, if not the priesthood, at least doing a monastic life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do envy that in a sense, but oh, by the way, I actually wanted to ask you: did you get the screenshots I showed you of the verses where you are asking for let's see, you were asking for a place in the Bible where what was it? Where until that is used in the same way in Matthew 1:25, and I gave you Acts 25:21.
I think. Let me go over here. Matthew 1:25 and Acts 25:21. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In our debate about the perpetual virginity, you gave you gave the morphology, the way until then is structured in Matthew 1:25, and you
Yeah.
compared. And when I gave you the Greek chaos, because it didn't come with ho chaos, or Heosus, in the places I cited, you casted doubt. But in Acts 25:21, they actually use the same grammatical form, and that verse speaks about Paul being held captive until going to see Caesar. But even after he sees Caesar, he is still held captive. So I think that would have been the best instance I could give you of that.
Okay. I'll take a look more into it, but yeah, thanks for reminding me of that. I just also recently downloaded your notes, and I sent you my notes because I remember you asked for that, and I hadn't gotten around to it, but I just sent you my particular notes that you asked for.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
And also thank you for chance randomness and theology. I know that's not the name of the book. Here it is: Chance and the Sovereignty of God, a God-centered approach to probability and random events.
I almost thought you said thank you for 4chan and God's sovereignty.
That's actually the best combo ever. You know, in God's sovereignty, he determined that 4chan would be created. That's hilarious.
That 4chan is evidence of total depravity.
And in being evidence to total depravity, it brings glory to God.
There you go. There you go.
Oh, speaking of which, RC, I think you'll be proud of me. I officially became reformed as of today.
What were you before?
Molinist.
You know, you could be both technically, but
let me explain how I see it as. I see it as within our own will, we are unable to come to God. That it is God who must first make the own move. With that being said, I believe we still have our own will in terms of making our day-to-day decisions. So compatibilists in that sense, but when it comes to salvation, it is God who must move on the heart of a human being. Now, when it comes to the issue of resisting the Holy Spirit, where Stephen mentions that, like how I mentioned earlier with History Net, that's the part that I'm still wondering about. I don't hold to the 5 points of Calvinism, but I'd still say that it is God who must first move on a person's heart in order for them to be saved, and the person must respond accordingly. Otherwise, a person cannot come to God by his own will. So that's the way how I see it.
Oh, all right then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'd say Reformed, but not Calvinist.
All right. At least it's something. I'll take that.
Congrats.
What, Luna?
I said congrats.
Yay! That's what. By the way, it wasn't so weird. It's just some weird sound. I was clapping earlier, just real fast, like what they do in the.
What was that? By the way, I am still mad at you for quoting Raymond Brown in our debate. I hope.
Oh boy.
I hold nothing but contempt for that person.
I know.
Not necessarily for what he said here, but mostly for his general critical theory, critical scholarship. At least with Bart Ehrman, I know what to expect. But come on, Father Brown, really?
Well, like I said, there's like, to me, that the reason why I quote some of these guys, because I agree. Like, to me, if I was to like just be how I was back then, I definitely wouldn't have even tried to do Raymond Brown. But from what I had learned, especially after looking into fallacies, simply dismissing the source based on, like, for example, if it's a liberal critical theorist, like someone like Dr. Brown, or because of certain ideas that he holds to, would be considered like a bit of a sort of genetic fallacy, I guess.
Oh,
is like saying dismiss it because of who is the author of it, or dismiss his arguments because of certain things that he has a hold to. And that's why, for me, it's all about what's the data he presents, rather than his beliefs. Because there's people that I believe are sound in theology, but whenever they make an exegetical argument on a thing, I disagree with them based on the data. Like like James White, for example, and his understanding of Psalm 82. I believe that it's referring to what they would call the gods that are up there, but the gods in the Elohim sense is just basically angels that are of a higher spiritual sense.
What does he claim they are?
Huh?
What does he claim they are?
Heiser or White?
White. You said you were critical of the fact that.
Yeah, White basically just believes, like, which is the majority view today, is that it believes that it's actually referring to human judges, like human rulers.
Yeah, that's weird.
Mm-hmm. Like, because I think like the main thing that they worry about is, number one, the fact that they don't want to attribute that there be other gods when it uses that term. So it uses a thing where a lot of people themselves, they have identified themselves as gods at times. And then secondly, Jesus's usage in citing it when he calls himself God, and then he, is getting ridiculed. And then he says, isn't it likewise written in your own scriptures that ye are gods? And so they try to use that to say, well, he's saying that ye are gods, as in you are the judges or something like that.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I think I'm more inclined to think that it's referring to the angels.
Yeah.
But going to Raymond Brown,
Of course.
the reason I dismiss Raymond Brown, in part I do admit I have a willing prejudice towards his towards him as a liberal scholar, but I think that my criticisms are also in the data that he presents, because it's coming from a presupposition that scripture itself is uninspired, and in light of that fact, the same kind of mentality that leads to the denial of the nativity stories is also leading to his denial of the perpetual virginity, at least being implicit within the texts.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of my own criticism of that.
Right. Anyone else want to want to contribute something?
Raymond haven't heard from are you talking about Raymond, about something he said earlier, or was he actually in the hangout?
Oh no,
no. Raymond Brown is a Catholic
critical textual scholar.
Yeah, and I mentioned him in the debate me and Max had a while back, and so Max wanted to bring it up because Max was definitely upset at me for bringing him up.
Well, it's a fake outrage. I'm just being a little humorous,
right?
but it was a smart citation. I'll give you that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
you flatter me.
I mean, yeah, I think it's kind of the equivalent of when I quoted Churitan to you. as an example of someone who at least believed it was more probable than not that she was a perpetual virgin.
Right. Good on you, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Like the early Reformed tradition still has its traces of Catholicism within it. So there's always quite a bit to go to in the initial Reformation. It's only really later on where we see the Protestantism that exists today emerge. Like, if it wasn't for the Anabaptists, I think that in general, Catholics and Protestants would have more in common today than not.
Could you repeat that one more time? I missed that.
Oh, I was going to say, I believe if it wasn't for sects like the Anabaptists, evangelicals, as other Protestants and Catholics today would have more in common in terms of doctrine.
Okay. I'm currently still learning things slowly now, so I'm starting to get to like your guys' level of understanding the Bible and everything. I've been going through a whole lecture series of Ryan Reeves. I'm just binging his series at the moment, and it's definitely beneficial for my wellspring of knowledge and edification. And
very good.
Yeah.
Learning at least a little bit at a time is way better than not learning anything at all. So good for you.
Oh, by the way,
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. By the way, what are your what is everyone's position here on postmillennialism?
No comment.
I don't have a comment either. Do I really have to say anything?
No. My opinion, no.
Postmillennialism. Is that the rapture happens after all is said and done? In the book
postmillennialism is the view that when God establishes the church, he's also establishing his kingdom on earth, and slowly and gradually over time, it's going to usher in the second coming of Christ physically on earth and restore the new heaven and the new earth by dint of the church's growth on earth. So in the same way that Islam imagines itself physically conquering the globe and pushing people into submission, postmillennialism would say that Christianity over time and up until the end times is going to grow so much that everyone is just going to believe in it, and in doing so, usher in the kingdom of God.
I don't know. My current view on eschatology is I understand very little. It's extremely confusing to me, and this is why I'm sticking with what I'm sticking with right now. Because charismatics have kind of ruined eschatology for me a bit.
I mean, yeah, I'd also be put off by eschatology too if it just meant that the Bible was speaking of attack helicopters. But the reason I bring this up is he has a movie. There's this one postmillennialist. He's a Reformed theologian. He actually convinced me of the postmillennial viewpoint. His name is Kenneth Gentry Jr. He has a terrific series called The Beast of Revelation Identified. Here, I'll send you guys the link. And it's actually pretty phenomenal for studying the book of Revelation and the New Testament apocalyptic sections in general.
Okay.
I'll
definitely save this one for later.
It's a 2-hour watch, but it's well worth it. He identified.
Oh my goodness! I know this guy. He did that one like 5 Points of Calvinism documentary that had like Sproul and all them other guys in it.
This guy is actually a colleague of Greg Bonson.
I wouldn't be surprised. My goodness, he has hair for once in this one, like an actual like longer like what was it like Billy Ray Cyrus type of kind of hair.
Oh, the mullet.
Yeah, like it's like halfway there, but it's like like in the Hannah Montana show, like it kind of shortened down a bit.
I see. Yeah, he's really good at what he does. He actually has this fantastic analysis of the book of Revelation. He says, imagine the book of Revelation is God divorcing himself from his unfaithful wife Israel, and then marrying the new Israel, who is the church, and what you actually have is a dramatic reading of that divorce in the year 70, told and reenacted through the Book of Revelation, and it answers so many questions so well. Like, it's what's called a partial preterist reading, but he pulls out scripture left, right, and center. Like, for example, it's really hard to believe that the Book of Revelation is a futuristic account when John says these are events which will soon come to pass. Like, it's not like saying, look, I know you guys are under persecution. I know you guys are facing turmoil amongst you. But at the same time, here's some unrelated event that's going to happen 2,000 years in the future. So, yeah, I really like that one verse. Really opened my eyes to it. And he also doesn't shy away from the idea of a final apostasy or a great apostasy either. He actually thinks that the great apostasy actually fits really well into the post-millennial context, because if an apostasy is so great, it's going to be noticeable in a world that would be mostly filled with Christians turning away from the faith, as opposed to Christians being a small number and then being an even smaller number. So I thought that was a pretty good answer to that objection. Although I'm kind of, and he also interprets the whore of Babylon as Israel for its unfaithfulness, and he does it by contrasting it certain symbols that it has with the Old Testament Israel. So, for example, wearing purple and scarlet, those were the attire of the priests in the Old Testament. He also says that when it says the whore of Babylon, things written on her forehead, that's actually a perversion of what the priesthood of Aaron used to do when they wrote the name of God or something of God on their forehead. So, and she's unfaithful in the sense that she's cohorting with Rome. And I think that's actually a pretty solid interpretation of it. Although I'm kind of curious as to who he views the woman in the Book of Revelation, the one that's ascending into heaven.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that could be the virgin. That could be Israel. The church comes after God, not beforehand. I think maybe he can say something along the lines of she represents the saints of both the Old and the New Testament. So that's one possibility.
I know. Funny thing, Revelation is probably my favorite book, and it is the first book that I read in the Bible from start to finish.
Me as well.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Funny thing is, there was when I was back into Yu-Gi-Oh and whatnot, way back when, and I was finding other card games. There was this Christian card game that I found at a Christian bookstore. I never figured out how to play it, but I was looking through this, and one of them was about the seven seals. And there was Revelation on there, and my mom was like, "Oh yeah, Revelation." And then later that night, I was like, Revelation. I'll flip to it, and then I just read the whole thing from start to finish. And then at the end of it, I just closed it, and that was it. It wasn't like profound or anything, but I was just like, this is really cool. I really enjoyed it, and every time I read it now, I have to read it from start to finish in one setting. So that's my experience with Revelation. Even though I may not understand it in its entirety, though chapters 1 through 4, I have a really good understanding of the letters to the church. The rest of it, the symbology and everything, I don't really understand. I still really enjoy it for some odd reason. I don't know if it's apocalyptic nature or if it's just, I don't know what it is, but I really enjoy the Book of Revelation. And one of my friends in high school was like, "Oh, you enjoy the Book of Revelation where everyone dies." So I don't know.
All right, so we're gonna make this. Of course, if anyone wants to still stay on and continue the conversation, feel free to. But this is where we're gonna end the live broadcast of this chill, relaxed after show hangout of the debates. If y'all haven't checked out the debate, again, the debate is in the description, so feel free to click on it, check it out, and you be the judge. Or if you don't want to do that, of course, as always, the debate has been put on our debate playlist, so that way you can easily just go there and click and have an easy access to watch it from Modern Day Debates channel. But until then, thank y'all for coming, and thank y'all for watching, and thank y'all for tuning in, and thank you for buying me a biscuit, Mr. Person that may be watching that owes me $50. I don't know. I'm gonna just go ahead and just head up and try to get to some sleep before I start hallucinating that there's Martians in my bedroom. Anyways, that being said, this has been RC Apologist. Take care.